When my daughter told me I was old and useless as I lay fighting for my life in the hospital, I felt my world collapse around me. Days later, I was sitting across from my lawyer as we finalized changes to my $92 million will. That's when I realized life isn't just a garden of roses. It's a battlefield where the people closest to you sometimes hold the sharpest knives. If you're watching this, please subscribe and comment if you've ever been betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for. Your story matters too. The ambulance lights painted the night in red and blue as the paramedics wheeled me from my modest home. The pain in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt before, like someone had wrapped barbed wire around my heart and was slowly, methodically tightening it. But even through that haze of agony, I remembered to grab my phone, to call the one person I thought would care. Rebecca. I gasped into the phone as they loaded me into the ambulance. I think I'm having a heart attack. They're taking me to Memorial. There was a pause on the other end, not the shocked, fearful silence of a daughter hearing her mother might be dying, but the irritated pause of someone whose evening plans had been interrupted. Mom, I'm at the Carmichael's dinner party. Can't you just call one of your friends? I'm sure it's just indigestion again. The paramedic took the phone from my trembling hand. Ma'am, your mother is experiencing severe cardiac distress. We're transporting her to Memorial Hospital immediately. I couldn't hear what Rebecca said next, but the paramedic's face hardened. I understand, ma'am. We'll take good care of her. He hung up and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Your daughter says she'll meet us there. I knew she wouldn't. Not right away, at least. Not until she'd finished her champagne, made her excuses, and calculated exactly how much time she needed to spend at her dying mother's bedside to avoid social censure. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, beeping machines, and urgent voices. They rushed me through the emergency room doors, medical terms flying over my head as they hooked me up to monitors and inserted IVs into my arms. Mrs. Sullivan, can you hear me? A young doctor leaned over me, her face serious but kind. You're having a cardiac event. We're going to do everything we can for you, okay? I nodded, unable to speak through the oxygen mask they'd placed over my face. My body felt like it was shutting down, but my mind remained cruelly alert. I kept watching the door, waiting for Rebecca to burst through, her face twisted with worry and regret for how she'd spoken to me. It was 3 hours before she arrived. 3 hours of tests, medication, and the terrifying reality that I might die alone in that sterile room. When she finally appeared in the doorway, she wasn't disheveled or teary-eyed. Her makeup was perfect, her designer dress immaculate. She hadn't rushed. Mom, she said, her voice flat as she approached my bed. The doctor says you had a minor heart attack. They're keeping you overnight for observation. I reached for her hand, desperate for some connection, some reassurance that my only child cared whether I lived or died. She allowed me to touch her for just a moment before pulling away to check her phone. Rebecca, I whispered, my voice weak. I was so scared. She glanced up, annoyance flashing in eyes that were so like my late husband's. You're always scared of something, Mom. You've been crying wolf for years. The doctor, Dr. Patterson, according to her name tag, entered the room then, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Sullivan, your tests show significant blockage in your coronary arteries. We're going to need to perform a procedure in the morning to place stents. Rebecca sighed dramatically. Is that really necessary? She's 73, for God's sake. These procedures are expensive, and for what? A few more years? I felt the blood drain from my face, not from my heart condition, but from the casual cruelty of my daughter's words. Dr. Patterson's professional demeanor slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening in shock before she composed herself. The procedure is absolutely necessary if your mother wants to continue living a full life, which I'm sure she does. And Medicare will cover most of the costs. Rebecca rolled her eyes and moved toward the door. Fine, whatever. I need to make some calls. As she stepped into the hallway, I heard her voice, not nearly as hushed as she thought. Don't waste time on her. She's old and useless. The doctor's face flushed with anger, but mine burned with humiliation. My own child, the baby I had rocked through countless nights of colic, The little girl I had raised alone after her father died when she was just 7. The young woman whose college education I had paid for by working 2 jobs. She thought I was useless. A waste of medical resources. A burden to be endured until inheritance day. Dr. Patterson squeezed my hand gently. "Mrs. Sullivan, we're going to take excellent care of you. Your life has value, no matter what anyone says, even family." I nodded, tears sliding down my face and into my ears. "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate your kindness." When Rebecca returned, she had composed a mask of daughterly concern, especially when Dr. Patterson was present. But I knew the truth now. I had seen behind the curtain, and there was no unseeing it. The procedure the next morning was successful, but recovery would take time. Rebecca visited for exactly 30 minutes each day, always dressed impeccably, always checking her watch, always making sure the nurses saw her devoted presence. On the 4th day, when the hospital social worker came to discuss my aftercare, Rebecca's mask slipped again. "She'll need someone to stay with her for at least a week," the social worker explained. "She won't be able to drive, cook, or do any strenuous activities." Rebecca's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. "A week? That's impossible. I have a charity gala this weekend, and the Hamptons house is being renovated next week. I can't possibly." "I can hire a nurse," I said quietly. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "With what money, Mom? You barely make ends meet with Dad's pension. I'll have to pay for it as usual." The social worker looked uncomfortable. "There are services available." "No," Rebecca cut her off. "No charity cases. I'll figure something out." She figured it out by hiring the cheapest home health aide she could find, a harried woman named Gladys who was juggling 7 other clients and could only check on me twice a day. The rest of the time, I was alone in my small house, shuffling carefully between my bed and the bathroom, living on delivered meals that Rebecca had grudgingly arranged. I didn't complain. Not because I was happy with the arrangement, but because something had fundamentally changed inside me during those days in the hospital. The pain of Rebecca's betrayal had crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. For decades, I had lived in service to her, sacrificing, working, giving. I had hidden my intelligence, my ambition, my very self behind the role of the doting mother. And for what? To be discarded like garbage when I was no longer useful to her? No. It was time for a reckoning. What Rebecca didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Edward and I had been more than the middle-class couple we appeared to be. My late husband had been brilliant with investments, turning a modest inheritance from his uncle into a considerable fortune through careful, conservative stock picks and real estate acquisitions. Before his sudden heart attack 20 years ago, Edward had set up trusts, offshore accounts, and a complex web of financial protections that kept our true worth hidden. "People show their true colors when money is involved, Eleanor," he had told me as we signed the paperwork. "I want you protected, and I want Rebecca to grow up understanding the value of work, not just the value of a dollar." So we had lived modestly. We had sent Rebecca to good schools, but not extravagant ones. We had taken vacations, but not lavish ones. We had given her everything she needed and much of what she wanted, but never in a way that would spoil her or reveal our true financial status. After Edward died, I had maintained the charade. Rebecca had been devastated by her father's death, and I worried that learning about the money would somehow tarnish her memories of him or make her feel he had deceived her. So I continued living in our comfortable but unassuming house, driving my reliable but aging car, working as a librarian not because I needed the income but because I loved books and the structure of a job. Over the years, I had watched my daughter grow increasingly materialistic, increasingly status-conscious, increasingly resentful of what she perceived as our modest means. She had married Warren, a man as ambitious and image-obsessed as she was, and together they lived perpetually beyond their means, always reaching for the next rung on the social ladder. They looked down on me. My simple clothes, my outdated haircut, my preference for quiet evenings with a book instead of glittering social events. I had told myself it didn't matter, that Rebecca would mature, that she would eventually see the value in the life lessons Edward and I had tried to teach her. But lying in that hospital bed, Hearing her call me old and useless, I realized I had failed. Not as a mother who provides, I had given her everything. I had failed as a mother who teaches values, who instills character. I had protected her from consequences for too long, and in doing so, I had created a monster. 2 weeks after my heart attack, I called my lawyer, Harold Winters. Harold had been Edward's friend and had managed our legal affairs for over 40 years. He was one of the few people who knew the full extent of our wealth. "Eleanor," he said warmly when I entered his office, rising to help me to a chair. "You're looking well. How's the recovery going?" "Better than expected," I replied, settling myself carefully. "But I didn't come to discuss my health, Harold. I need to make changes to my will." His bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. May I ask what prompted this decision?" I told him everything. Rebecca's callous words at the hospital, her grudging assistance during my recovery, the years of watching her grow into someone Edward would have been ashamed of. Harold listened without interruption, his face growing increasingly grave. When I finished, he removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I can't say I'm entirely surprised," he admitted. "The few times I've interacted with Rebecca in recent years, I've noticed a hardness about her that wasn't there when she was younger. Edward would be heartbroken." "I know," I said, my voice catching. "I've failed him, Harold. I thought I was protecting her, but I was enabling her worst instincts." "You haven't failed anyone, Eleanor. You did what you thought was best with the information you had at the time. That's all any of us can do." He replaced his glasses and leaned forward. "Now, tell me what changes you want to make." For the next 2 hours, we drafted a new will. One that would ensure Rebecca finally learned the lessons I had failed to teach her while she was growing up. It was both punishment and opportunity, a chance for her to finally see herself clearly and perhaps, someday, become the person her father and I had hoped she would be. "Are you certain about this?" Harold asked when we had finished. "It's likely to cause quite a dramatic reaction." I thought about Rebecca's cold eyes as she dismissed my worth in that hospital corridor. "I'm certain, Harold. It's time for the truth to come out, all of it." On my way home, I stopped at a coffee shop I rarely frequented. I needed time to think, to be sure I was doing the right thing. As I sipped my tea, a young mother at the next table struggled to quiet her fussing toddler while simultaneously trying to eat her own lunch. Without thinking, I reached into my purse and pulled out a small notebook and pen, quickly sketching a simple rabbit that I folded into a makeshift puppet. "May I asked the harried mother, holding up my creation. She nodded gratefully, and I gently presented the paper rabbit to the little boy. "Hello there," I said in a high, squeaky voice that made him instantly stop crying. "What's your name?" "Jamie," he whispered, fascinated. For the next few minutes, I entertained Jamie with my paper rabbit while his mother gratefully ate her sandwich. When the child was finally giggling instead of crying, I handed him the puppet and smiled at his mother. "Thank you so much," she said, genuine gratitude in her eyes. "That was incredibly kind of you." "It was my pleasure," I replied, gathering my things to leave. I remember those days with my own daughter. Sometimes a moment's peace is worth more than gold. As I walked to my car, I felt a strange mix of sadness and certainty. The young mother's genuine appreciation for a small kindness had only reinforced my decision. Rebecca had everything: beauty, education, opportunity, and yet she had never learned the simple grace of gratitude or the quiet dignity of compassion. Yes, my new will would shock her. Yes, it would upend her carefully constructed world. But perhaps, in that upheaval, she might finally discover what truly matters. The next few weeks passed in relative calm. Rebecca called occasionally, her voice dripping with artificial concern, always managing to mention some expense she had covered for me or some inconvenience my health issues had caused her. I listened, thanked her appropriately, and said nothing of my visit to Harold's office. Then, on a Wednesday morning exactly 1 month after my heart attack, Harold called. "It's done, Eleanor," he said. "The new will has been properly executed and filed. All the accounts have been updated according to your instructions." "Thank you, Harold. I appreciate your efficiency." "There's one more thing," he added, his voice taking on an odd tone. Rebecca called me yesterday. She wanted to inquire about your will, specifically, whether it had been updated since Edward's death. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What did you tell her? Only that your affairs were in order and that any specific questions about your estate would have to wait until the appropriate time, as a standard procedure. She seemed unsatisfied with that answer. I wasn't surprised. Rebecca had been asking increasingly pointed questions about my finances lately, disguised as concern for my future care. I see. Thank you for letting me know. After hanging up, I sat for a long time at my kitchen table, staring at the worn surface where Rebecca had once done her homework, where Edward and I had shared thousands of meals, where a family had been built and sustained through love and sacrifice. Now that same table would bear witness to its unraveling. I didn't have to wait long. That very evening, my doorbell rang insistently, followed by the sound of a key in the lock, the emergency key Rebecca had insisted I give her after my heart attack, just in case. Mom? Her voice echoed through the house, sharp with impatience. Are you home? In the living room, I called back, setting aside my book and straightening my cardigan. She appeared in the doorway, immaculately dressed as always, her face set in what she probably thought was an expression of filial concern. Warren hovered behind her, his handsome face carefully neutral. They made a striking couple, both tall, both blonde, both expertly groomed and polished. Looking at them, you would never guess the financial problems I knew they were having, the mounting debt they concealed behind their perfect facade. Mom, you look terrible, Rebecca announced, dropping her designer handbag on my coffee table. Have you been taking your medication? Yes, Rebecca. I follow my doctor's instructions to the letter. She glanced around my living room with poorly disguised disdain. This place is a mess. Don't tell me that useless home health aide isn't cleaning for you. We're paying her good money. I gave Gladys the week off. I interrupted. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself now, and she has other clients who need her more. Rebecca exchanged a look with Warren. That's actually what we came to talk to you about, Eleanor, he said, using my first name as he always did, as if we were contemporaries rather than mother-in-law and son-in-law. Your long-term care. Oh. I kept my voice neutral. Rebecca sat down across from me, arranging her face into what she probably thought was an expression of loving concern. Mom, Warren and I have been talking, and we think it's time for you to consider moving into a retirement community. A retirement community, I repeated. More of a continuous care facility, actually, Warren clarified, his voice smooth as oil. A place where you can have independence now but access to medical care as your needs progress. I see. And have you found such a place? Rebecca brightened, pulling a glossy brochure from her bag. Yes. It's called Sunset Villas. It's in Arizona. Arizona? I've lived in Connecticut my entire life. The climate would be better for your health, Warren explained patiently, as if to a child. And the facility is top-notch. Not cheap, of course, but worth it for your comfort and our peace of mind, Rebecca finished. I took the brochure and flipped through it silently. The facility looked pleasant enough, but I noted it was located in a remote area outside Phoenix, far from any major city, and even farther from Connecticut, where Rebecca and Warren lived. They weren't just trying to ensure my care, they were trying to remove me from their lives entirely. And how do you propose I pay for this? I asked, knowing full well what was coming next. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Well, that's the thing, Mom. We've been looking at your finances. You've been what? I injected just the right amount of shock into my voice. Don't be dramatic, she sighed. We're trying to help you. Anyway, if you sell this house, which is way too big for you now, and liquidate Dad's pension fund, you should have just enough to cover the entrance fee and a few years of care. After that, she trailed off, then brightened. But the good news is, Warren and I are willing to cover any shortfall. We've talked to our financial advisor, and once we receive our inheritance, we'll be able to ensure you're taken care of for the rest of your life. There it was. The real reason for this sudden concern about my living situation. They were running out of money and patience, and they wanted to accelerate their access to what they assumed would be a modest but helpful inheritance. How thoughtful, I murmured, setting the brochure aside. But I'm afraid I'll have to decline. I'm perfectly happy here in my way too big house. Rebecca's smile faltered. Mom, be reasonable. You had a heart attack. You need specialized care. I have specialized care. Dr. Patterson has connected me with an excellent cardiologist, and I have regular checkups. My house is paid for, my pension covers my living expenses, and I value my independence. Warren leaned forward, his businessman persona taking over. Eleanor, I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation. Another cardiac event could leave you incapacitated. What then? Rebecca and I have our own lives, our own responsibilities. We can't drop everything to care for you if something happens. I would never expect you to, I replied calmly. That's why I've made my own arrangements. Rebecca's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What arrangements? I've updated my advance directive, established a healthcare proxy with my lawyer rather than burdening you, and set aside funds for home healthcare should it become necessary. All true, though not the complete truth. With what money? Rebecca demanded, her facade of concern cracking. You've never had savings, Mom. You worked at a library, for God's sake. Dad's pension barely covers your property taxes and utilities. I smiled slightly. I've managed my resources carefully. Rebecca stood abruptly, her patience clearly exhausted. This is ridiculous. You're being stubborn and selfish, as usual. We're trying to help you, to make sure you're taken care of, and you're throwing it back in our faces.
Come on, Warren.
We're wasting our time. Warren rose more slowly, studying me with calculation in his eyes. Unlike Rebecca, he sensed there was something I wasn't saying, some card I wasn't showing. Think about our offer, Eleanor. Sunset Villas has a waiting list. We can't hold your spot indefinitely. After they left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, the glossy brochure for Sunset Villas still on my coffee table. A quick internet search on my tablet confirmed what I had suspected. The facility was among the cheapest in Arizona, with numerous complaints about inadequate staffing and poor care. They hadn't been looking out for my best interests at all. They had been looking for the most expedient way to remove me from their lives while gaining control of what they thought were my meager assets. The next morning, I received a text from Rebecca. Appointment with Sunset Villas admissions director next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Warren arranged a video call so you don't have to travel. Don't be late.
I didn't respond.
The weekend passed quietly. I tended my garden, had lunch with my friend Margaret, and finished the novel I'd been reading. On Monday, I visited my safe deposit box at the bank and retrieved several important documents, including photographs I hadn't looked at in years. Tuesday morning, I dressed carefully in a simple but elegant navy dress I had purchased recently, applied light makeup, and styled my silver hair. At precisely 9:55 a.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rebecca and Warren on my doorstep, both looking impatient. You're not even dressed properly, Rebecca complained, eyeing my outfit with disapproval. This is a video interview, Mom. You need to look presentable. I am dressed, Rebecca, I replied mildly, but I won't be participating in any interview today. I've made my decision, and it's final. I'm staying in my home. Warren's jaw tightened. Eleanor, be reasonable. We've gone to considerable trouble to arrange this meeting. I didn't ask you to, I pointed out. In fact, I specifically told you I wasn't interested. Rebecca threw up her hands in exasperation. This is unbelievable. You had a heart attack. You could have died. You need proper care, and you're being impossibly stubborn about it. Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside, I suggested, aware that my neighbors could hear Rebecca's increasingly strident voice. Once in my living room, Rebecca rounded on me again. I don't understand why you're fighting us on this. It's the sensible solution for everyone. For everyone, or for you? I asked quietly. She flushed. What is that supposed to mean? It means, Rebecca, that I'm fully aware this sudden concern for my welfare coincides remarkably with your financial difficulties. Warren stepped forward. That's uncalled for, Eleanor. We're trying to help you. Are you? Or are you trying to access what you believe is your inheritance before I've actually died? Perhaps you're finding it inconvenient to wait. Rebecca's face contorted with anger. How dare you? After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Rebecca? I interrupted, my voice still calm, but now edged with steel. When I was lying in that hospital bed fighting for my life, you told the doctor not to waste time on me because I was old and useless. Those were your exact words. She paled slightly, but recovered quickly. I never said that. You were confused on medication. I was perfectly lucid. And Dr. Patterson heard you too. Warren placed a restraining hand on Rebecca's arm. This isn't productive. Eleanor, regardless of any misunderstandings, the fact remains that your health is precarious and your financial resources are limited. We're offering a solution that addresses both issues. That's very generous of you, I said, but as I've mentioned, I've made my own arrangements. Rebecca's patience snapped. With what money? You're barely getting by. I looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing my child's face, and made a decision. It was earlier than I had planned, but perhaps it was time. I think we should all go see Harold, I said quietly. Harold Winters? Dad's old lawyer. Rebecca looked confused. Why? Because I believe it's time for complete transparency about my situation, financial and otherwise. Warren's eyes narrowed with sudden interest. What do you mean? Call it a preview of what you can expect when I'm gone, I said, since you're so concerned about my assets and how they'll be distributed. Rebecca and Warren exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret, part excitement, part suspicion. Fine, Rebecca said finally. Let's go see Harold. Maybe he can talk some sense into you about this care facility. Harold's office was in a stately old building in downtown Hartford, a place that had always intimidated Rebecca as a child. As we walked through the imposing oak doors, I saw her straighten her shoulders and check her reflection in a decorative mirror, preparing to impress, as always. Harold's secretary, Mrs. Abernathy, greeted me warmly. Mrs. Sullivan, how lovely to see you. Mr. Winters is expecting you and your family. Rebecca shot me a suspicious look. You already arranged this meeting? I called from the car, I said simply. Harold rose from behind his massive desk as we entered his office, coming around to greet me with genuine warmth. Eleanor, you're looking well. The recovery is progressing. Yes, thank you, Harold. I turned to my daughter and son-in-law. You remember Rebecca, of course, and her husband Warren. Of course. Harold's smile cooled noticeably as he shook their hands. Please have a seat. Can I offer anyone coffee or water? Once we were all settled, Harold looked to me. How can I help you today, Eleanor? Rebecca and Warren have expressed concern about my financial situation, particularly as it relates to my long-term care. They seem to believe I lack the resources to remain independent. I thought perhaps you could clarify matters. Harold's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. I see. He turned to Rebecca and Warren. May I ask what prompted these concerns? Warren leaned forward, all business. Eleanor had a serious heart attack recently. We're worried about her ability to care for herself, and we've found an excellent continuous care facility that would be perfect for her needs. However, there seem to be some misconceptions about her financial situation that are causing unnecessary friction. Misconceptions, Harold repeated, his tone neutral. Rebecca jumped in. Mom seems to think she has some secret nest egg that will allow her to hire round-the-clock care if needed. We're concerned she's not being realistic about her finances. Harold looked at me. And you brought them here today because I'm tired of the deception, Harold. It's time they knew the truth about everything. He nodded slowly. Are you certain? This is earlier than we discussed. I'm certain. Harold pressed the intercom on his desk. Mrs. Abernathy, could you bring in the Sullivan portfolio, please? The complete file. While we waited, Rebecca fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. Warren sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Harold's desk as if he could will the information to appear faster. Mrs. Abernathy entered with a thick folder, which she placed in front of Harold before quietly exiting and closing the door behind her. Harold opened the folder and removed several documents. Rebecca, Warren, what I'm about to share with you is information that your mother and father decided to keep private for many years. I want to be clear that this was their choice, made for reasons they believed were in your best interest. Rebecca frowned. What are you talking about? Harold glanced at me, and I nodded for him to continue. Your father, Edward Sullivan, was not merely the high school history teacher you knew him as. While that was indeed his profession and one he loved deeply, he was also an exceptionally gifted investor. Beginning with a modest inheritance from his uncle in 1962, he built a substantial portfolio of investments, primarily in blue-chip stocks, real estate, and later, certain technology companies that proved to be remarkably successful. Warren's posture changed subtly, his interest visibly sharpening. When Edward died, Harold continued, his estate was valued at approximately $27 million. Rebecca made a strangled sound, her face draining of color. 27 million? That's impossible. We lived in a 3-bedroom house. I went to public school. We drove used cars. Yes, I said quietly. We did.
By choice.
Harold nodded. Edward and Eleanor made a conscious decision to live modestly and to keep their wealth private. They didn't want it to define their lives or yours. Warren's voice was tight with controlled excitement. And now, what is the estate currently worth? Harold consulted another document. As of last month's valuation, the Sullivan estate is valued at approximately $92 million. The room fell silent. Rebecca stared at me, her mouth open in shock. Warren had gone completely still, his eyes calculating rapidly. 92 million, Rebecca finally whispered. All this time, all these years, you've been worth $92 million? The estate is, I corrected gently. It's not quite the same thing. Warren recovered first. Eleanor, this is overwhelming news. Why would you and Edward keep this from the family? From Rebecca? Edward believed, and I agreed, that great wealth can be as much a burden as a blessing. We wanted Rebecca to develop her own identity, her own work ethic, her own values, not to be defined by or dependent on family money. Rebecca stood abruptly, pacing the office. Do you have any idea what this would have meant for us? The opportunities we missed, the struggles we could have avoided? Warren's business could have expanded years ago with proper investment. We wouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in mortgage debt. You're not exactly living paycheck to paycheck, Rebecca, I pointed out. You have a 5-bedroom house in the best neighborhood in Hartford, 2 luxury cars, and vacations in Europe. If you're struggling financially, it's because of your choices, not your resources. She whirled on me, eyes flashing. How dare you judge us? You, who've been lying to me my entire life. We never lied, I said firmly. We simply chose not to disclose the full extent of our financial situation. There's a difference. Warren placed a calming hand on Rebecca's arm. Let's focus on the present, not the past. Eleanor, now that we know about the estate, perhaps we can discuss how this changes our plans for your care and your legacy. Always the businessman, I thought. Already calculating how to get his hands on the money. Actually, Harold interjected, that's precisely why Eleanor asked me to share this information today. There have been some recent changes to her estate planning that you should be aware of. Rebecca sank back into her chair, her anger momentarily replaced by keen interest. What changes? Harold removed another document from the folder. Following her recent hospitalization, Eleanor made significant revisions to her will and the structure of the family trusts. Given the circumstances, she felt it was necessary to ensure that her wishes would be properly carried out. What circumstances? Warren asked sharply. And what changes? Harold looked to me, and I nodded once more. Eleanor has amended her will to reflect certain concerns about how her estate would be managed after her death. The new arrangements are quite specific. Rebecca leaned forward. What does that mean exactly? Harold adjusted his glasses. It means, Rebecca, that your inheritance is now conditional. Conditional on what? She demanded. On your behavior, I said quietly. Both past and future. Warren's expression darkened. That sounds suspiciously like coercion, Eleanor. Not at all, Harold assured him. The conditions are quite reasonable and legally sound. They're designed to ensure that Eleanor's wishes for her legacy are respected. And what are these conditions? Rebecca asked, her voice tight. Harold began to explain the details of the new will, how the bulk of the estate would bypass Rebecca entirely if certain conditions weren't met, how trusts had been established for my grandchildren with strict controls that neither Rebecca nor Warren could access, how a substantial portion had been designated for charitable causes. As he spoke, I watched my daughter's face transform. Shock gave way to disbelief, then to a calculating assessment, and finally to a cold fury I had never seen before. Warren, meanwhile, had gone completely still, his eyes fixed on Harold with an intensity that was almost predatory. When Harold finished his explanation, the office fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Rebecca sat frozen, her knuckles white where she gripped the arms of her chair. "This is insane," she finally whispered. "You're punishing me because I suggested a retirement home? Because I'm trying to ensure you're properly cared for?" "No, Rebecca," I said gently. "I'm responding to a pattern of behavior that culminated in your statement at the hospital. Don't waste time on her. She's old and useless." Those words revealed how you truly see me, and they cannot be unsaid. I was stressed.
I was worried about you.
Were you? Because from where I was lying, fighting for my life, it seemed like you were inconvenienced by my continued existence. Warren cleared his throat. "Eleanor, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Whatever misunderstanding occurred at the hospital, it doesn't erase decades of family bonds. Rebecca is your only child, your only family. Being family is about more than blood, Warren. It's about respect, care, and genuine concern for another's welfare, not just what they can provide for you." Rebecca stood suddenly, her face flushed with anger. "This is about control, isn't it? This is about control, isn't it? You've always tried to control me, to force me to live by your outdated values and your small-minded morality. And now you're using this fortune you hid from me my entire life, to control me from beyond the grave." I sat calmly as Rebecca's words echoed through Harold's office, watching the daughter I had raised transform into someone I barely recognized. The elegant facade she had cultivated had cracked completely, revealing the raw greed and entitlement beneath. If you're watching, please subscribe and share this story if you've ever discovered that someone close to you wasn't who you thought they were. "This meeting is over," Rebecca spat, grabbing her purse.
"Come on, Warren."
"We're calling our own lawyer." Warren, however, remained seated, his eyes calculating. "Wait, Rebecca. Let's not be hasty." He turned to Harold with a practiced smile. "Surely there's room for negotiation here. Family disagreements happen, especially during health crises. I'm confident we can find a middle ground that respects Eleanor's wishes while acknowledging Rebecca's position as her only child." Harold's expression remained impassive. "The terms of the will are quite clear, Mr. Caldwell. While Mrs. Sullivan is alive, she can certainly modify them if she chooses. But I should note that the document includes specific provisions regarding attempts to contest it or exert undue influence." "Meaning what exactly?" Warren asked, his smile fading. "Meaning," I interjected, "that if you challenge the will after my death, or if there's evidence you try to pressure me into changing it while I'm alive, the entire estate goes directly to the charitable foundation, bypassing the family entirely." Rebecca made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "You can't do this. It's not fair." "Fair," I repeated, the word hanging in the air between us. "Was it fair when you told that doctor I wasn't worth saving? Was it fair when you visited me for exactly 30 minutes each day in the hospital, checking your watch the entire time? Was it fair when you suggested shipping me off to that substandard facility in Arizona so you wouldn't have to be bothered with my existence?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's exactly what happened, Rebecca. And do you know what I realized, lying in that hospital bed? I realized I've been enabling your worst qualities your entire life. By protecting you from consequences, by smoothing your path, by putting your comfort above everything. Even the truth, I helped create the person standing before me now. Warren stood and placed his hands on Rebecca's shoulders. I think we all need time to process this information. Eleanor, you've given us a lot to think about. Perhaps we can revisit this conversation when emotions aren't running quite so high. That's entirely up to you, I replied. My decision is made. As they left Harold's office, Rebecca didn't look back, but Warren paused at the door, giving me a long, assessing look that sent a chill down my spine. There was something calculating in his eyes, something that went beyond mere disappointment or anger. It was the look of a predator whose prey had suddenly revealed unexpected defenses. Well, Harold said after the door closed behind them, that went about as expected. I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 73 years. Was I too harsh, Harold? Have I destroyed any chance of reconciliation? He removed his glasses and polished them thoughtfully. You told the truth, Eleanor. Sometimes the truth is harsh. As for reconciliation, that depends entirely on Rebecca, doesn't it? On whether she's capable of seeing beyond her own desires to recognize the person you truly are. And if she isn't, then the will serves its purpose, protecting your legacy from someone who doesn't truly value it, or you. I nodded, gathering my purse and standing. I should go. Thank you for your help today. Eleanor, Harold said as he walked me to the door. Be careful. People don't always react rationally when large sums of money are involved, especially when they believe they're entitled to it. You think they might, what? Try to harm me. I think Warren Caldwell is a man accustomed to getting what he wants, by whatever means necessary. And I think your daughter has never faced real consequences before. Just be vigilant. I took his warnings seriously. On the drive home, I called a security company and arranged for the installation of a comprehensive system at my house. Cameras, motion sensors, upgraded locks. I also called my bank and added additional verification requirements for any transfers or withdrawals from my accounts. Small precautions, perhaps, but necessary ones. The house felt emptier than usual when I returned, haunted by the ghost of the family we had once been. I moved through the familiar rooms, touching photographs, books, the small treasures Edward and I had collected during our marriage. In our bedroom, I opened his side of the closet, which I had preserved exactly as it was the day he died. The familiar scent of his aftershave had long since faded, but I could still imagine it if I closed my eyes. I've made a mess of things, Edward, I whispered to the empty room. I thought I was protecting her, but I was really protecting myself from seeing who she truly is. And now I don't know if there's any way back. My phone rang, startling me from my reverie. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Sullivan? This is Dr. Patterson from Memorial Hospital. My heart skipped a beat. Dr. Patterson, yes. Is something wrong? Not at all. I'm calling because I received a rather unusual inquiry today and wanted to alert you. A man claiming to be your son-in-law called requesting copies of your medical records, specifically the notes from your cardiac event last month. He said you had authorized the release but couldn't sign the forms yourself due to your condition. A cold feeling spread through my chest. I did no such thing. And my condition is much improved, as you know. That's what I thought, she said grimly. I informed him that we would need proper authorization and that I would need to speak with you directly. He became quite insistent, even suggesting that your cognitive function might be impaired and that your daughter had power of attorney, which she absolutely does not.
I'm aware.
The hospital has no record of any power of attorney on file for you. Mrs. Sullivan, I don't want to alarm you, but this kind of deception raises red flags for me. As your physician, I'm concerned about potential elder abuse or exploitation. Elder abuse. The words hung in the air, ugly but impossible to dismiss. Was that what this was? Had it already gone that far? Thank you for alerting me, Dr. Patterson. I've recently had a difficult conversation with my daughter and son-in-law about my finances. It seems they may be exploring options I hadn't anticipated. I see. Her voice was carefully neutral. Mrs. Sullivan, I'd like to refer you to our hospital's Elder Services Coordinator. She can provide resources and support if you're experiencing family pressure or manipulation. I agreed to the referral, thanked her again for her vigilance, and ended the call with a promise to come in for my scheduled follow-up the next week. As I set the phone down, I noticed my hands were trembling. Warren had tried to access my medical records, presumably looking for evidence of cognitive decline or some other condition he could use to challenge my competence. The will Harold and I had created was airtight, as long as I was deemed mentally sound, but if Warren could build a case that I was confused or impaired when I made the changes, I needed to document my mental clarity to create an indisputable record that would stand up to any challenge. I called Harold back. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" His concern was evident even through the phone.
Not exactly.
Warren tried to get my medical records from the hospital by claiming I was cognitively impaired and that Rebecca has power of attorney. Harold's sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know about the seriousness of this development. That's a significant escalation. I think we need to take additional precautions. By the end of our conversation, we had arranged for me to undergo a comprehensive cognitive assessment with an independent neuropsychologist, scheduled a video recording of me discussing the will and my reasons for the changes, and set up a meeting with a forensic accountant to document the pattern of financial decisions I had made over the past decades. All evidence of my continued competence and consistent decision-making. "One more thing," Harold said before we hung up. "I'm going to send someone to stay with you for a few days. A private investigator I work with regularly. He's discreet, professional, and frankly, I'd feel better knowing someone was there." I started to protest, but stopped myself. Pride wouldn't serve me now.
All right.
"Thank you, Harold." The investigator, a former police detective named Michael Reeves, arrived that evening. In his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and watchful eyes, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to difficult situations. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, shaking my hand firmly. Harold filled me in on the basics. "I'm here primarily as a precaution, but I'll also be documenting any concerning behavior from your daughter or son-in-law." "You think they might actually try to harm me?" I asked, the question sounding absurd even as I spoke it. "Physical harm? Unlikely, though not impossible when this much money is involved. But there are many ways to hurt someone that don't leave visible bruises. Psychological pressure, isolation, manipulation of medications. I've seen it all in cases like this." "Cases like this," I repeated hollowly. "Is that what my family has become? A case?" His expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry. That was insensitive of me. Let's just say I'm here to ensure your safety and document anything that might be relevant later." Michael set up in my guest room, installed additional security cameras that connected to his phone, and gave me a panic button to wear around my neck. "Just in case," he assured me. It was all surreal, like something from a television drama rather than my actual life. But the hospital call had shaken me more than I wanted to admit, and having Michael's solid presence in the house was reassuring. The next morning, Rebecca called. I put the phone on speaker so Michael could hear from the next room.
"Mom?"
"It's me." Her voice was softer than it had been in Harold's office, almost contrite. "I think we need to talk." "I agree," I said cautiously. "Would you like to come over? Actually, I was hoping you could come to our house for dinner tonight. Warren's grilling steaks, and the kids would love to see their grandmother. It's been too long." The invitation was unexpected. Rebecca rarely included me in family dinners, and when she did, it was usually for holidays or special occasions. And she was right about one thing. It had been too long since I'd seen my grandchildren. Tyler was 14 now, Madison 12, and little Emma just 8. I missed them terribly. "That sounds lovely," I said, a part of me hoping that perhaps the shock of yesterday's revelation had sparked genuine reflection. "What time would you like me to come?" 7 would be perfect. "And Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday. It was just such a shock, you know? Finding out about the money, and then the will. I said things I didn't mean." "I appreciate that, Rebecca. I'll see you at 7. As I hung up, Michael entered the room, his expression concerned. "You're not actually going, are you?" "Of course I am. They're my family." "Mrs. Sullivan, with all due respect, this invitation comes less than 24 hours after they discovered your wealth and your new will, And on the same day, we learned your son-in-law tried to access your medical records under false pretenses. The timing is suspicious at best. I sighed, sinking into my favorite armchair. I know how it looks, but they're still my family, and my grandchildren will be there. Are you sure about that? Did you speak to them? No, but Rebecca said. Rebecca said what she thought would get you to come. He interrupted gently. Mrs. Sullivan, I've been doing this a long time. This dinner invitation has all the hallmarks of a setup. They want to get you alone, possibly record you saying something they can use against you, or maybe pressure you into reconsidering the will. I wanted to argue, to defend my daughter, to insist that she wouldn't go that far. But the memory of her cold voice in that hospital corridor, "Don't waste time on her, she's old and useless," echoed in my mind. If she could say that when she thought I had nothing of value to offer, what might she do now that she knew the truth? What do you suggest? I asked finally. Go, but not alone. I'll drive you there and wait outside. Wear this. He handed me what looked like an ordinary brooch. It's a recording device. It will capture everything said during the dinner. If nothing inappropriate occurs, no harm done. But if they try to pressure you or manipulate you, we'll have evidence. It felt like a betrayal to record a family dinner secretly, but hadn't they already betrayed my trust in far more significant ways? I agreed to Michael's plan, and at 6:45 that evening, we drove to Rebecca and Warren's sprawling colonial in one of Hartford's most exclusive neighborhoods. Remember, Michael said as he parked a few houses down, the brooch will record everything. Try to speak clearly, and if you feel uncomfortable or threatened at any point, use the code phrase we discussed. I'll call with an emergency that requires you to leave immediately. I nodded, suddenly nervous. I feel like I'm in a spy movie. Just a precaution, he assured me. Hopefully unnecessary. Rebecca answered the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mom, you're right on time.
Come in.
I stepped into the foyer, immediately noticing the silence. Where are the children? I was looking forward to seeing them. Oh, didn't I mention? They're at sleepovers tonight. Such busy social lives, you know how it is. But they send their love. The first lie of the evening, I thought, remembering Michael's skepticism. The grandchildren had never been part of the plan. Warren appeared from the direction of the kitchen, holding a glass of wine. Eleanor, good to see you. Can I get you a drink? We have that Chardonnay you like. Just water for now, thank you. I'm still on medication for my heart. Of course, how thoughtless of me. His smile was as artificial as Rebecca's. Come, let's sit in the living room while the steaks finish marinating. The living room was immaculate as always, designed more for show than comfort, with white furniture that made me nervous to sit on, and abstract art that Rebecca had once admitted she didn't understand, but had been assured was valuable. I perched on the edge of a pristine sofa, accepting the water Warren handed me. Mom, Rebecca began, settling across from me, we've been doing a lot of thinking since yesterday. About the money, about the will, about everything. I'm glad to hear that, I said carefully. We realize now that we may have misunderstood each other. The situation at the hospital. I was stressed, worried about you. I would never have meant those words the way they sounded. Warren nodded sympathetically. We all say things we don't mean in moments of crisis. The important thing is that we're family and family forgives. Family also tells the truth, I replied, and respects each other's autonomy. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. Of course. And we do respect you, Mom. We just want what's best for you. And what do you think that is? Well, Warren interjected smoothly, we've been reconsidering the retirement community idea. You're clearly capable of making your own decisions about where you live. But we do worry about your safety, living alone in that big house. I've installed a security system, I said. And I have regular check-ins with friends and neighbors. Rebecca leaned forward, her expression earnest. That's wonderful, Mom. But accidents can happen when you're alone. Falls, medical emergencies, we worry. I appreciate your concern, but I've taken precautions for those possibilities as well. Warren set his wine glass down with a little too much force. Eleanor, let's be direct. We made mistakes yesterday. We were shocked by the revelations about your finances and reacted poorly. But surely you can understand our perspective. Finding out that your parents, who raised you to value modesty and frugality, had been sitting on a fortune the entire time, it was a lot to process. I understand that, Warren. It was a decision Edward and I made together, one we believed was in Rebecca's best interest. Rebecca made a dismissive sound. Best interest? Do you have any idea how different my life could have been? The opportunities one missed because I thought we had to be careful with money? The sacrifices I made. What sacrifices exactly? I asked quietly. You had a loving home, excellent education, travel experiences, support for any activity you wanted to pursue. What did you lack that would have truly made a difference in who you became? She flushed. That's not the point. The point is you lied to me. For decades. We chose not to disclose our full financial situation. There's a difference. Warren stepped in smoothly. Let's not rehash old arguments. What matters now is moving forward as a family. Eleanor, we respect your right to make your own decisions about your estate. But we hope you'll reconsider some aspects of the new will. The conditions you've placed on Rebecca's inheritance feel punitive. They're not meant to be punitive, I said. They're meant to reflect my values and ensure that my legacy is used in ways I believe are important. But to essentially disinherit your only child unless she meets certain behavioral standards? Rebecca's voice rose slightly. It's like you're treating me like a misbehaving teenager, not a grown woman with her own family. The conditions aren't arbitrary, Rebecca. They reflect basic human decency and respect, qualities I would hope any adult would demonstrate, particularly toward their parent. Warren's smile had become fixed. Perhaps we could discuss specific modifications? For instance, the requirement that Rebecca perform community service hours to access certain funds seems excessive. I blinked in surprise. I never included any such requirement in my will. Rebecca and Warren exchanged a glance. That's what our lawyer told us, Rebecca said, after we described the changes Harold mentioned. Then your lawyer is either incompetent or deliberately misrepresenting my will to inflame you. There is no community service requirement. The primary condition is simply that you demonstrate respect and care for me while I'm alive and honor certain charitable commitments after I'm gone. So, if I'm nice to you, I get the money? Rebecca's voice had taken on an ugly edge. That's emotional blackmail. If that's how you choose to see it, then perhaps you've made my point for me, I replied, standing up. I think I should go. This conversation isn't productive. Warren rose quickly.
No, please stay.
We're just getting everything out in the open. That's healthy, right? Clear the air. There's nothing healthy about this conversation, Warren. You invited me here under false pretenses, claiming my grandchildren would be present. You've misrepresented the contents of my will. And now you're suggesting that expecting basic human decency from my daughter is emotional blackmail. I think we're done for tonight. Rebecca stood as well, her face flushed with anger. So that's it? You dropped this bombshell about being worth millions. Tell me I can only have my inheritance if I pass some kind of character test, and then walk out when I dare to question it. I'm leaving because this dinner was clearly not arranged in good faith. You didn't want reconciliation. You wanted to pressure me into changing my will. And why shouldn't you change it, she demanded. I'm your daughter, your only child. That money should come to me and my children without strings attached. It's what Dad would have wanted. The mention of Edward was the final straw. Your father, I said quietly, would be heartbroken to see what you've become. He wanted to raise a daughter with integrity, compassion, and genuine values. Not someone who sees her mother as nothing but a checkbook and an inconvenience. Rebecca's face contorted with rage. You self-righteous old. That's enough, Warren interrupted sharply, placing a restraining hand on Rebecca's arm. Eleanor, please. We're all upset. Let's not say things we'll regret. I think enough regrettable things have already been said. I moved toward the foyer, retrieving my purse from the side table where I'd placed it. Good night. As I reached for the door, Warren called after me. This isn't over, Eleanor. That money belongs in the family. One way or another, we'll make sure it stays there. The threat was thinly veiled, but a threat nonetheless. I didn't respond, simply closed the door behind me and walked to where Michael waited in his car. "That was quick," he commented as I slid into the passenger seat. "How bad was it?" "Bad enough," I replied, unpinning the brooch and handing it to him. "They lied about my grandchildren being there, misrepresented the terms of my will, and when I wouldn't agree to their demands, Warren essentially threatened me." Michael's expression darkened. "What kind of threat?" "Nothing specific. Just that one way or another they'd make sure the money stayed in the family." He nodded grimly. "We'll add it to the documentation." Harold was right to be concerned. The drive home was quiet, my mind replaying the evening's events. Had it really come to this? Had money corrupted my daughter so completely that she saw me only as an obstacle between her and wealth? Or had the money simply revealed who she truly was, who she had perhaps always been beneath the surface? When we arrived at my house, Michael insisted on checking the property before allowing me inside. "Everything looks secure," he reported after a thorough inspection. "But I think we should consider additional precautions going forward. That threat, vague as it was, concerns me." "What kind of precautions?" "For starters, I wouldn't eat or drink anything they give you. I'm not saying they'd go as far as drugging you, but you're not saying they wouldn't," I finished, the reality of my situation suddenly hitting me full force. "My God, what has happened to my family?" Michael's expression softened. "Mrs. Sullivan, I've seen too many cases where money changed people, or rather, revealed their true nature. It's not your fault. You raised your daughter as best you could, gave her values and opportunities. What she chose to do with those lessons, that's on her, not you." I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to argue. "Thank you for your help tonight, Michael. I think I need to rest now." "Of course. I'll be in the guest room if you need anything." Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through memories of Rebecca's childhood, her first steps, her school plays, the proud smile on her face when she graduated college. Had I missed signs along the way? Had there been moments when I could have redirected her path, helped her develop the character and integrity that seemed so glaringly absent now? Around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "You think you're so clever with your new will, but there are other ways to get what belongs to us. Sleep well, mother." I showed the message to Michael in the morning. His face hardened as he read it. "This crosses a line," he said. "It's clearly intended to intimidate you. We should file a police report and tell them what? That my daughter and son-in-law are threatening me because I won't give them unlimited access to my money."
Exactly that.
"Elder abuse and financial exploitation are serious crimes, Mrs. Sullivan. And threats like this," he held up my phone, "are evidence." I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 73 years. I never thought it would come to this. Filing police reports against my own child. "I understand your reluctance," Michael said gently. "But documenting these incidents creates a paper trail that could be crucial later, especially if their behavior escalates." Reluctantly, I agreed. We spent the morning at the police station, where a sympathetic detective took my statement, made copies of the text message, and filed a report. She also connected me with the department's Elder Services Unit, which echoed Dr. Patterson's concerns about potential exploitation. "Unfortunately, we see cases like this more often than you might think," the Elder Services officer told me. "When significant assets are involved, family dynamics can become complicated." Complicated, I repeated. Such a mild word for the nightmare my life had become. After the police station, Michael drove me to the neuropsychologist Harold had arranged for my cognitive assessment. Dr. Elaine Winters, no relation to Harold, despite the shared surname, was a formidable woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Sullivan," she greeted me, shaking my hand firmly. "I understand you're seeking documentation of your cognitive status for legal purposes?"
Yes.
"My daughter and son-in-law may attempt to challenge my competence regarding changes I've made to my will." She nodded briskly. "I see this situation more often than I'd like. We'll conduct a comprehensive assessment, memory, reasoning, judgment, the works. It will take about 3 hours. Are you up for that today? I am. The assessment was exhausting. A battery of tests, questions, puzzles, and scenarios designed to evaluate every aspect of my mental functioning. By the end, I was mentally drained but oddly satisfied. I knew I had performed well. Dr. Winters confirmed this as she reviewed her notes. Mrs. Sullivan, based on today's assessment, I can state unequivocally that your cognitive function is not only intact but exceptional for someone of any age. Your memory, reasoning, and judgment are all well above average. There is absolutely no clinical basis for questioning your competence to manage your affairs or make changes to your will. Thank you, Dr. Winters. How soon can you provide a formal report? I'll have it on Harold's desk by tomorrow afternoon. And Mrs. Sullivan? For what it's worth, I'm sorry you're going through this. Family conflicts over money are particularly painful. The validation felt good, but as Michael and I drove home, a new worry began to form. If Rebecca and Warren couldn't challenge my competence, what might they try next? The text message from the night before suggested they were growing desperate, and desperate people could be dangerous. My concern deepened when we turned onto my street and saw a police car parked in front of my house, lights flashing. Officer Jenkins, a young patrolman I recognized from my visit to the station that morning, was standing on my porch. Mrs. Sullivan, he called as I got out of the car. Glad you're here. We received an anonymous call about a possible break-in at this address. Michael stepped forward, showing the officer his investigator's credentials. I've been staying here as security for Mrs. Sullivan. The house was secure when we left this morning. Officer Jenkins nodded. We've done a perimeter check and everything looks intact, but we haven't entered the premises. Would you like us to do a full search of the interior? Yes, please, I said, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. The officer and his partner conducted a thorough search while Michael and I waited on the porch. When they emerged, Officer Jenkins' expression was grim. There's no sign of forced entry, but someone has definitely been inside. Several drawers have been opened and papers disturbed in what looks like a home office. Nothing obvious seems to be missing, but you'll want to check more carefully. Thank you, officer, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We filed a report this morning about threats I've received. I suspect this may be related. He nodded. I'll add this incident to that report. And Mrs. Sullivan, you might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days, just as a precaution. After the police left, Michael and I carefully went through the house. The intruder had focused primarily on my home office, where I kept personal papers, but had also searched through my bedroom dresser and closet. They were looking for something specific, Michael observed, examining the disturbed items. Financial documents, perhaps? Or something they could use to challenge your competence. I keep all important documents in my safe deposit box or with Harold, I said. There's nothing here that would help them. Michael frowned, taking photos of the disturbed areas with his phone. They wouldn't know that. The question is, who did this? Rebecca and Warren themselves, or someone they hired? Does it matter? Either way, they're responsible. It matters for evidence purposes, and for understanding how far they're willing to go. He paused, considering. I think Officer Jenkins is right. You shouldn't stay here tonight. Do you have friends you could stay with? Someone Rebecca doesn't know about, ideally? I thought for a moment. My friend Margaret. She lives in West Hartford. Rebecca's met her at family events, but doesn't know where she lives. Perfect. Pack a bag for a few days. I'll call Harold and update him, then drive you there. As I packed essentials into a small suitcase, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching someone else's life unravel. How had it come to this? Fleeing my own home, because I feared what my daughter might do next. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Michael appeared in the bedroom doorway, his expression tense. It's Rebecca, he said quietly. She's alone. I can send her away if you prefer. I considered for a moment, then shook my head.
No.
I want to hear what she has to say. But stay close, please. He nodded. I'll be in the next room. Remember, the recording devices are still active. When I opened the door, Rebecca stood on the porch looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her clothes casual, a far cry from her typical polished appearance. "Mom," she said, her voice hoarse. "Can I come in? Please." I stepped aside, allowing her to enter but not moving to embrace her as I once might have done. "What do you want, Rebecca?" She flinched at my tone. I came to apologize. For last night. For everything." "Apologize?" I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "Why now?" She sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking very young and vulnerable. "Warren and I had a huge fight after you left. I told him things had gone too far, that threatening you was crossing a line. She hesitated, then pushed up her sleeve, revealing a darkening bruise on her forearm. "He didn't like being challenged." My heart contracted painfully. "Did he do that to you?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "It's not the first time. He's always had a temper, but lately, with the financial pressure we're under, it's getting worse. And when he found out about your money, something changed in him. He's obsessed with getting it, talks about it constantly, makes plans for what he'll do when it's finally ours." I sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm scared, Mom. Not just of Warren, but of what I'm becoming. When you walked out last night, I saw myself through your eyes for a moment, greedy, entitled, cruel. I didn't recognize that person. I don't want to be her." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I needed you to know that I see it now, what I've done, who I've become. And I'm sorry. So deeply sorry." Part of me wanted to believe her, to take her in my arms as I had when she was a child with a skinned knee or hurt feelings. But the bruise on her arm gave me pause. It was too convenient, too perfectly placed to elicit exactly the sympathetic response I was feeling. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "I appreciate your apology, but I need to ask, did you or Warren have anything to do with someone breaking into my house today?" Her eyes widened. "Breaking in?
What are you talking about?"
"The police were here when I got home. Someone had searched through my office and bedroom." She shook her head vigorously.
"No."
"Mom, I swear I had nothing to do with that. Warren's been at the office all day, and I've been at home. Ask Mrs. Peterson next door if you don't believe me. She saw me gardening in the front yard this morning." It was a specific, verifiable alibi, not something she would likely offer if she were lying. But that still left Warren or someone he might have hired. "Do you think Warren could have arranged it?" I asked. Her hesitation told me everything. I don't know. He's been making strange phone calls, being secretive. Last night, after our fight, he locked himself in his study for hours. I heard him talking to someone, but he wouldn't tell me who. I studied my daughter's face, trying to see past the tears and dishevelment to the truth beneath. Was this genuine remorse, or another manipulation? The bruise looked real, but could it have been self-inflicted or the result of something other than Warren's abuse? "What do you want from me, Rebecca?" Beyond accepting your apology. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a childlike gesture that tugged at my heart. "Nothing. I mean that. I don't deserve anything from you after how I've behaved. I needed you to know that I see what I've done. And I'm going to try to be better, whether you believe me or not." "And Warren? What about him?" Her expression hardened slightly. "I'm taking the kids and leaving him."
"Today."
I'm taking the kids and leaving him."
"Today."
"I've already packed our bags and made arrangements to stay with my friend Jessica for a few days until I can figure out what to do next." Rebecca's voice trembled, but her eyes held a determination I hadn't seen in years. If you're watching this, please subscribe and comment if you've ever had to make a difficult choice between trusting someone who hurt you or walking away forever. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe that my daughter had finally seen the truth about herself and her husband. But the timing was too convenient, the transformation too sudden after years of calculated selfishness. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "this is a lot to process. If you're truly leaving Warren, I support that decision. Abuse is never acceptable. but I hope you understand why I might be cautious about your sudden change of heart." She nodded, wiping away tears. "I know. I wouldn't believe me either. But Mom, when I saw that bruise this morning, something just broke inside me. I thought about the kids, about what they're seeing, the example we're setting. And then I thought about you, about all the terrible things I've said and done." Her voice caught. "I realized I've become exactly the kind of person you and Dad raised me not to be." Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded. "Mrs. Sullivan, I hate to interrupt, but we should be leaving soon if we want to get to Margaret's before dark." Rebecca looked up, startled. "Who is this? And why are you going to Margaret's?" "This is Michael Reeves, a private investigator who's been helping me with security concerns. And I'm staying with Margaret temporarily because someone broke into my house today." Her face paled. "You think it was Warren?" "I think it was someone looking for financial documents or other items that could be used against me. Whether that was Warren himself or someone he hired, I don't know." Rebecca stood suddenly. "I should go. I need to get the kids from school before Warren does. He sometimes picks them up on Thursdays and I can't let him have them right now." She moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. "Mom, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I am sorry. For everything. And I'm going to prove it to you, somehow." After she left, Michael looked at me questioningly. "What do you think? Was that genuine?" I sighed, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know. The bruise seemed real, but the timing is suspicious," he finished. "Breaking away from an abusive spouse is the right move, but it also conveniently positions her as a victim who needs your support and, potentially, your financial assistance." "You're very cynical, Mr. Reeves. I prefer realistic. In my line of work, you see patterns and sudden transformations right after discovering a $92 million inheritance is at stake. That's a pattern I've seen before." I couldn't argue with his logic, but my heart was conflicted. The Rebecca who had just left my house had seemed more like the daughter I remembered, vulnerable, genuine, capable of self-reflection, than the cold, calculating woman who had dismissed me as old and useless in that hospital corridor. "Let's proceed as planned," I said finally. "I'll stay with Margaret for a few days while you investigate the break-in and monitor the situation with Rebecca and Warren." Margaret welcomed me with open arms and minimal questions, setting me up in her comfortable guest room and plying me with tea and homemade cookies. A retired English professor with a no-nonsense attitude and fierce loyalty, she had been my closest friend since we met at a library fundraiser 15 years ago. "You'll stay as long as you need to," she declared, brooking no argument. "Now, tell me everything." I did, from Rebecca's cruel words at the hospital to the revelation about my fortune, the changed will, the threats, and finally, Rebecca's unexpected visit that afternoon. Margaret listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. "Eleanor," she said when I had finished, "I've known you for 15 years, and in all that time, you've never spoken a negative word about Rebecca. You've made excuses for her behavior, rationalized her absences from your life, defended her priorities. And now I understand why. You've been protecting yourself from the truth." "What truth?" "That the daughter you raised is not the person you wanted her to be. That despite your best efforts, she's become someone who values money and status above human decency, above you." The bluntness of her assessment stung, but I couldn't deny its accuracy. She seemed genuinely remorseful today. Margaret's expression softened. Perhaps she was. People can change, have moments of clarity. But real transformation takes time and consistent effort. It doesn't happen in an instant because it's suddenly advantageous. "You think she's manipulating me? I think she's at a crossroads. The question is whether her regret is about what she's done or simply about the consequences she's facing." We were interrupted by my phone ringing. It was Harold. "Eleanor, I've been trying to reach you. Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm staying with Margaret for a few days. There was a break-in at my house." He made a sound of dismay. "That's actually why I'm calling. The police contacted me about the report you filed. But there's something else you should know. Warren came to my office this afternoon." My heart sank. What did he want? to discuss reasonable accommodations to your will, as he put it. When I explained that I could only make changes at your explicit instruction, he became unpleasant, suggested that you might not be in a position to make sound decisions much longer. That sounds like a threat. I took it as one, Harold agreed. I've strengthened the language in your living will and healthcare directive to specifically exclude Rebecca and Warren from any decision-making authority. I've also added Dr. Winter's cognitive assessment to your file. Her report is extremely thorough and leaves no room for challenges to your competence. Thank you, Harold. There's one more thing. Warren mentioned that Rebecca had gone to see you today to reconcile. He seemed very interested in whether you had mentioned this to me or changed your mind about the will. So Warren knew about Rebecca's visit. Was it part of a coordinated strategy between them? Or was Rebecca truly acting independently, perhaps even against Warren's wishes? I need you to do something for me, Harold, I said, making a sudden decision. I want to set up a trust for my grandchildren immediately. Something Warren and Rebecca can't touch, but that would provide for the children's education and basic needs if necessary. I can arrange that. Do you want to use some of the existing estate funds or create a new allocation? New allocation. Take $5 million from my personal accounts and establish the trust today. Make Margaret the trustee until the children are of age. Margaret looked startled at this, but I silenced her questions with a shake of my head. I would explain later. After ending the call with Harold, I turned to my friend. I need to know if Rebecca is telling the truth about leaving Warren, about the abuse. If she's genuinely trying to protect my grandchildren, I want to help her, but in a way that Warren can't exploit. And if she's lying, if this is all an act to get access to your money, then the children are still protected, and I'll have my answer about Rebecca. That night, I slept poorly, my dreams filled with fragmented images. Rebecca as a small child, crying over a skinned knee, Rebecca in her graduation cap and gown, beaming with pride, Rebecca in that hospital corridor, her face cold as she dismissed my worth. And woven through it all, Edward's voice, gentle but persistent. Trust, but verify. Love, but protect yourself. In the morning, Michael called with an update. I've been monitoring Warren's movements, he reported. He spent several hours at his office yesterday, then went home around 6. No sign of Rebecca or the children at the house. He made several calls from the landline, but I don't have access to those records yet. This morning, he left home at 7:30, looking agitated. He went to Tyler's school first, then Madison's, then Emma's. The office staff at each location turned him away. So Rebecca really did take the children, I murmured, a small flicker of hope kindling inside me. It appears so, but that doesn't necessarily validate the rest of her story. No, it doesn't. Have you learned anything about the break-in? The police found partial fingerprints that don't match anyone in the household. They're running them through the system, but it could take time. I've been reviewing the security camera footage from your neighbors. There's a suspicious vehicle that parked down the street during the estimated time frame of the break-in, a black SUV with tinted windows. The license plate is partially obscured, but I'm working on enhancing the image. Keep me updated, I said. And Michael? Thank you for your thoroughness. After hanging up, I turned to find Margaret watching me with concern. You've been thrown into a John Le Carre novel, she observed. Private investigators, security cameras, mysterious black SUVs. All because your daughter discovered you're wealthy. It just sounds absurd when you put it that way, I admitted. But Harold believes the threats are credible, and after the break-in. I'm not questioning the precautions, she assured me. I'm marveling at how quickly money can corrupt relationships. But enough of that. What's your plan for today? I hesitated. I'd like to try to see my grandchildren. If Rebecca is truly leaving Warren, they must be confused and frightened. And if she's not, if this is all an elaborate manipulation, I still want to make sure they're all right. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. A reasonable desire. But how will you find them? You said Rebecca's staying with a friend named Jessica. Jessica Chen. They've been friends since college. I've met her a few times at family events. Do you have her address? No, but I have her phone number somewhere in my contacts. Rebecca used to leave it as an emergency backup when the children were younger. After some searching, I found Jessica's number and called. A wary voice answered on the third ring. "Hello, Jessica? This is Eleanor Sullivan, Rebecca's mother." There was a pause. "Mrs. Sullivan."
Yes.
How did you get this number?" "Rebecca left it with me years ago as an emergency contact." "Jessica, I know Rebecca, and the children are staying with you. I'd like to see them, if possible." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. She's going through a lot." "I understand, but I'm concerned about my grandchildren. This must be very confusing for them." "It is," Jessica admitted, her voice softening slightly. "They're upset, especially Tyler. He doesn't understand why they had to leave so suddenly." "Please, Jessica."
Just a short visit.
"I won't press Rebecca about anything. I just want to see the children. Let them know their grandmother is here for them." I heard muffled voices, as if Jessica had covered the phone to speak with someone else. Then she came back on the line. "Rebecca says you can come for lunch. 12:30. I'll text you the address." "Thank you. I'll be there." After I hung up, Margaret fixed me with a stern look. "You're not going alone, Margaret." "Don't Margaret me. I may be a retired English professor, but I've read enough mystery novels to know you don't walk into a potentially manipulative situation without backup. I'm coming with you, and that's final." I smiled, grateful for her loyalty. "All right, but let me do the talking." Jessica's apartment was in a modern complex in West Hartford, not far from the upscale shopping district. As Margaret and I approached the door, I felt an unexpected flutter of nerves. What if Rebecca was telling the truth? What if this was a genuine turning point, a chance to rebuild what had been broken between us? And what if it wasn't? What if this was just another manipulation, more elaborate than the last? Jessica opened the door before we could knock, greeting us with a tense smile. A petite woman with sleek black hair and watchful eyes, she had always struck me as more substantial than most of Rebecca's friends, more interested in ideas than appearances. "Mrs. Sullivan, good to see you. And this is my friend Margaret Donovan. Thank you for allowing this visit, Jessica." She nodded, stepping aside to let us enter. "Rebecca's in the kitchen with the kids. They just got back from the park." The apartment was small but tastefully furnished, with books lining the walls and colorful artwork brightening the spaces between shelves. It felt lived in, comfortable in a way Rebecca and Warren's showcase home never did. Rebecca looked up from where she was helping Emma wash her hands at the kitchen sink. She was dressed simply in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, a far cry from her usual polished appearance. The bruise on her arm had darkened, now unmistakably visible against her pale skin. "Mom," she said, her voice cautious. "And Margaret. Hello." Before I could respond, Emma spotted me and broke free from her mother's grasp, running toward me with outstretched arms. "Grandma," she cried, flinging herself at me with the unrestrained enthusiasm only an 8-year-old can muster. "I didn't know you were coming. Did you bring cookies?" "You always bring cookies." I laughed, kneeling to embrace her despite the protest from my knees. "Not today, sweetheart. But next time, I promise." Tyler and Madison appeared from what I assumed was a bedroom, their expressions more reserved than their younger sisters. At 14, Tyler was already showing signs of the man he would become, tall and serious with his father's blonde hair, but, thankfully, my late husband's gentle eyes. 12-year-old Madison, caught in that awkward space between childhood and adolescence, hung back slightly, watching the adults with a wary intelligence that reminded me painfully of Edward. "Hi, Grandma," Tyler said, his voice carefully neutral. "Mom didn't tell us you were coming. It was a last-minute invitation," I explained, standing and opening my arms to him. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward for a brief hug. Madison followed, her embrace slightly longer, her whispered, "I missed you," nearly bringing tears to my eyes. Rebecca observed this reunion with an unreadable expression. Jessica's made lunch for everyone. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and soup. "That sounds perfect," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Can I help with anything?" "No need," Jessica interjected smoothly. Everything's ready. Kids, go wash up, please. As the children disappeared down the hall, Rebecca approached me, her voice low. Thank you for coming. They've been asking about you. They have. She nodded, a flush of shame coloring her cheeks. I haven't been good about arranging visits. Warren always had some reason why it wasn't convenient. She glanced toward Margaret, who was engaged in conversation with Jessica across the room. I know you probably brought her as a witness or protection or whatever. I don't blame you.
But I meant what I said yesterday, Mom.
I'm done with the lies and manipulation. I'm trying to do better. The lunch that followed was surprisingly pleasant. Jessica was a gracious hostess. The children were delighted to have my attention, and even Rebecca seemed more relaxed than I had seen her in years. She asked about my recovery from the heart attack, listened attentively to my responses, and encouraged the children to share stories about school and their activities. Only once did tension surface, when Emma innocently asked, "When are we going home? I miss my room and my toys." Rebecca's face tightened momentarily. We've talked about this, Em. We're having a little vacation with Aunt Jessica for now. Your dad needs some time to work on some things. Is it because he was yelling? Emma persisted. He yelled really loud, and it scared me. Yes, sweetheart, Rebecca answered, her voice gentle but firm. That's part of it. Sometimes grown-ups need time apart to figure things out. Tyler's expression darkened. He didn't just yell, Mom.
He threw things.
He grabbed you. Don't sugarcoat it. Rebecca looked stricken. Tyler. No, I'm sick of pretending everything's fine when it's not, the boy continued, his voice rising.
He hurt you, Mom.
He's been hurting you for a long time. I'm not stupid. I see things. I hear things. The table fell silent. Madison stared at her plate. Emma looked confused, and Jessica and Margaret exchanged concerned glances. I watched my grandson, seeing the pain and anger etched in his young face, and felt a surge of protective rage. If Warren had been hurting Rebecca in ways the children could witness, what else had they been exposed to? Tyler, I said gently, thank you for being brave enough to speak the truth. That takes courage. He looked at me, surprise replacing some of the anger in his expression. You believe me? Of course I do. And I want you to know that your mom is doing the right thing by bringing you here, away from that situation. I'm proud of her for that. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Mom, it's the truth, I said simply. Leaving an abusive situation is one of the hardest things a person can do. Many never find the strength. After lunch, Jessica took the younger children to her small balcony to look at the container garden she was growing, while Tyler retreated to the guest room with a book. Rebecca, Margaret, and I remained at the table, an awkward silence settling over us. So, Margaret said finally, what's your plan, Rebecca? You can't stay with Jessica indefinitely. Rebecca sighed, running a hand through her hair. I know. I'm looking for an apartment we can afford on my income. I've taken a leave of absence from the foundation where I volunteer, and I'm applying for actual paying jobs. It's been humbling, realizing how dependent I've been on Warren financially. What about your joint accounts? I asked. Surely you have access to some funds. She shook her head. Warren controls all the major accounts. I have a personal checking account for household expenses, but he monitors it closely. And now that I've left... She trailed off, her expression bleak. He's frozen everything. My credit cards aren't working. I had about $2,000 in cash that I've been saving secretly, but that won't last long with 3 kids. I glanced at Margaret, who gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was time to test Rebecca's sincerity. I've established a trust for the children, I said. $5 million, designated specifically for their education and basic needs. Margaret is the trustee, which means Warren can't touch it, but neither can you, directly. It's not meant as a commentary on your parenting, I added quickly, seeing her expression change. It's protection against Warren's potential legal maneuvers. Rebecca stared at me for a long moment, then did something that shocked me completely. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. That's perfect, Mom.
Thank you.
I was so worried about how I'd provide for them if Warren cuts us off completely. Knowing their future is secure, that he can't touch that money, it's a huge relief. Margaret looked as surprised as I felt. If Rebecca had been playing us, if her goal was access to my fortune, this would have been the moment for disappointment or anger at the restrictions I had placed on the funds. Instead, she seemed genuinely grateful for the protection the trust provided. "You're not upset that you can't control the money?" Margaret asked bluntly. Rebecca shook her head. "Why would I be? It's for the kids, and it's protected from Warren. That's what matters." She looked at me, her eyes sincere. "Mom, I know I've given you every reason to doubt me. I know I've been selfish and entitled and awful to you. But this isn't about money anymore. It's about keeping my children safe and becoming someone they can respect. Someone I can respect." I wanted to believe her. The evidence was compelling. The bruise, the children's confirmation of Warren's behavior, her genuine relief about the trust, the fact that she had actually left her comfortable home to cram into Jessica's small apartment with 3 kids. But decades of disappointment and manipulation had taught me caution. "I appreciate your understanding about the trust," I said carefully. "And I want to help you and the children through this transition. But Rebecca, I need time. Trust that's been broken can't be repaired overnight." She nodded, her expression somber. "I know. And I'm not asking for your forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I can change, that I want to change." The rest of the visit passed peacefully. I spent time with each grandchild, re-establishing connections that had been allowed to weaken over the years. As Margaret and I prepared to leave, Rebecca walked us to the door. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It meant a lot to the kids. And to me. I'll be back soon," I promised. "And Rebecca, if you need anything at all for the children, please call me. Day or night." She nodded, then hesitated before adding, "Warren called this morning.
He was scary, Mom.
Threatening. Said he'd destroy me if I didn't bring the kids home. Said he knew things about me that would ensure I never got custody." "What kinds of things?" I asked, alarmed. "I don't know. Probably nothing real, just more manipulation. But he sounded desperate. Unhinged. Just be careful, okay? He blames you for turning me against him." On the drive back to Margaret's house, we dissected every aspect of the visit, every nuance of Rebecca's behavior. "I think she's telling the truth," Margaret said finally. "About the abuse, at least. The children's reactions were too genuine to be coached, especially Tyler's." "I agree. But that doesn't mean she's had a complete change of heart about everything else." "No, but it's a start. People can change when they're removed from toxic influences. And if Warren is as controlling and abusive as he appears to be, who knows how much of Rebecca's behavior has been shaped by that dynamic over the years." It was a perspective I hadn't fully considered, the extent to which Warren might have influenced or even orchestrated Rebecca's treatment of me. Not that it excused her behavior, but it added a layer of complexity to the situation that gave me pause. When we arrived at Margaret's house, Michael was waiting for us, his expression grim. "What's happened?" I asked, immediately alarmed. "The police identified the fingerprints from your break-in. They belong to a man named Victor Ramirez, a known associate of a private investigator who was recently disciplined by the licensing board for unethical practices. And guess who hired that investigator 6 days ago?" "Warren," I guessed. Michael nodded. "Warren Caldwell paid him $10,000 in cash for what was described as asset location services. The police are looking for Ramirez now, but he seems to have disappeared. And there's something else." He handed me a file folder. "These were mailed to your house today. The security service forwarded them to me." Inside the folder were photographs, dozens of them. Rebecca entering and leaving various medical offices over the past year. Rebecca meeting with men who were not Warren in restaurants and hotels. Rebecca engaged in what appeared to be heated arguments with these same men. And most disturbingly, Rebecca with bruises similar to the one she had shown me, dated months before our recent confrontation. "What is this?" I whispered, horrified. "Warren's insurance policy," Michael said grimly. "These photos tell a very specific story that Rebecca has been having affairs, that she's been seeking psychiatric treatment, and that her injuries were not caused by Warren, but by these other men, or were self-inflicted. There are accompanying witness statements that support this narrative. But that's absurd. The children confirmed his abusive behavior just today. Children can be manipulated, especially in high-conflict divorce situations. Warren is building a case that Rebecca is unstable, promiscuous, and self-harming, and that you're enabling her delusions as part of a conspiracy to deny him access to his children and, by extension, your fortune. I sank into a chair, the photographs spilling from my lap onto the floor. This is insane. Why go to these lengths? 92 million reasons, Margaret said quietly, picking up one of the fallen photographs. The question is, how much of this is fabricated, and how much might be true? None of it's true, I insisted. I saw the children today. They confirmed Warren's abuse. Tyler was explicit about it. Michael nodded thoughtfully. That's significant. But Warren's clearly been planning this for some time. These surveillance photos date back months. He's been creating a narrative, building evidence for something. We need to warn Rebecca immediately. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, it rang in my hand. An unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Sullivan? A woman's voice, professional but urgent. This is Nurse Carrington from Hartford Memorial. Your daughter Rebecca has been admitted to the emergency room. She's asking for you. My blood ran cold. What happened? Is she all right? She's stable, but she's sustained multiple injuries consistent with assault. She's requesting that you come as soon as possible. She says it's urgent. I'll be right there, I promised, ending the call and turning to Michael and Margaret. Rebecca's in the hospital. She's been attacked. The drive to Hartford Memorial was tense, my mind racing with possibilities, each more terrible than the last. Had Warren found her at Jessica's apartment? Had he hurt the children too? Or was this somehow connected to the photographs, to whatever elaborate scheme he had been constructing? When we arrived at the emergency room, a nurse directed us to a curtained area where Rebecca lay on a hospital bed, her face badly bruised, her lips split, a bandage wrapped around her right wrist. Jessica sat beside her, holding her uninjured hand, while a police officer stood at the foot of the bed taking notes. "Mom," Rebecca whispered when she saw me, her voice hoarse. "You came." "Of course I came," I said, rushing to her side. "What happened? Where are the children?" "They're safe," Jessica assured me quickly. "My mother picked them up. They're at her house." The police officer, a serious-looking woman with cropped gray hair, introduced herself as Detective Morales. "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand you're Miss Caldwell's mother. We're investigating an assault that occurred approximately 2 hours ago. Your daughter has identified her husband, Warren Caldwell, as the attacker. He found us," Rebecca said, wincing as she tried to sit up straighter. "He was waiting outside Jessica's apartment when we got back from your visit. He demanded to see the children. When I refused, She gestured to her battered face. Jessica intervened. "If she hadn't, I think he might have killed me. He kept saying I'd ruined everything, that it was too soon for this part of the plan." Detective Morales's expression sharpened. "Plan? What plan?" Rebecca shook her head. "I don't know." He was incoherent, raging. But I got the impression he had some kind of schedule or timeline that I disrupted by leaving him when I did. I exchanged glances with Michael, who had been hanging back near the curtain. The photographs, the break-in, the asset location services, all part of some larger strategy that Rebecca's departure had apparently derailed. "We have a warrant out for Mr. Caldwell's arrest," Detective Morales continued. "But he seems to have disappeared. His office reports he left early today and hasn't been seen since. His car was found abandoned in a shopping center parking lot about a mile from Ms. Chen's apartment." "The children," I said urgently. "If he's still out there." "We've stationed an officer at Ms. Chen's mother's house," the detective assured me. "And we've alerted Border Patrol and transportation hubs in case he attempts to flee the area. We'll find him, Mrs. Sullivan." After the detective left to check on the status of the investigation, Rebecca turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. For how I've treated you, for the things I said at the hospital, for letting Warren manipulate me for so long. You were right about him, about everything. And now my children are in danger because I was too blind to see what was happening. I took her uninjured hand, careful not to disturb the foreline. They're safe, Rebecca. And so are you now. That's what matters. Jessica cleared her throat. I should call my mother, update her on the situation. Eleanor, will you stay with her? Of course. After Jessica left, Michael stepped forward, introducing himself to Rebecca and explaining his role as my security consultant. Then, gently but directly, he told her about the photographs and documents that had been delivered to my house. Rebecca listened in horror, her battered face growing paler with each revelation. Those men, they're financial advisors I've been meeting with privately, trying to understand our real situation. Warren's been lying about our finances for years, hiding debt, making risky investments. And the medical offices, those are therapy appointments. I've been seeing a psychologist for depression and anxiety. Warren doesn't know. Or, I thought he didn't know. And the bruises in the earlier photographs. I asked quietly. She closed her eyes briefly. Those were from Warren too. It's been happening for years, but always where it wouldn't show. Until recently, when he started getting careless. More violent. I think the financial pressure was making him unravel. Michael nodded grimly. It appears he's been documenting your activities and creating an alternative narrative about the source of your injuries. Combined with the break-in at your mother's house and his attempt to access her medical records, it suggests a coordinated plan to discredit both of you. But why? Rebecca asked, bewildered. What would be the point? Control of your mother's estate, Michael said simply. If he could establish that you're unstable and that your mother is being manipulated by you or is cognitively impaired, he could potentially challenge the new will and any trusts established for the children. Rebecca's expression hardened, a flash of the old determination showing through her injuries. He won't get away with this. Not with hurting me, not with frightening my children, and certainly not with threatening my mother or her legacy. For the first time since that terrible day in the hospital, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. The daughter speaking now was not the cold, calculating woman who had dismissed me as useless, nor was she the broken, pleading figure who had appeared on my doorstep with a bruised arm. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along, buried beneath layers of Warren's influence and her own worst instincts. As if reading my thoughts, Rebecca squeezed my hand. I know an apology isn't enough, Mom. I know I've hurt you deeply, repeatedly, over years. But I swear to you, if I get through this, if my children and I come out safely on the other side, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being your daughter again. Before I could respond, Jessica burst back through the curtains, her face pale with panic. The children are gone, she gasped. My mother stepped out for 5 minutes to speak with the police officer, and when she came back, they had vanished. The officer is searching the neighborhood, but there's no sign of them. Rebecca tried to sit up, crying out in pain. Warren. It has to be Warren. He's taken my babies. We don't know that for certain, Michael cautioned, already dialing on his phone. Let me contact my associates, see if we can get more resources looking for them. But I knew in my heart that Warren had indeed taken the children. This was the culmination of whatever plan he had been constructing, leverage that no one, not Rebecca, not the police, and certainly not I, could ignore. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. With trembling hands, I opened it to find a photo of Tyler, Madison, and Emma, huddled together in what appeared to be a hotel room, their faces tear-stained but unharmed. The message below the photo was chilling in its simplicity. 92 million, or you never see them again. No police. Instructions to follow. Tick-tock, Grandma. My blood ran cold as I stared at the photo of my terrified grandchildren. Warren had crossed a line I never imagined he would, from manipulation and abuse to outright kidnapping. I showed the message to Rebecca, whose anguished cry brought a nurse rushing into the curtained area. If you're watching this, subscribe now and comment if you've ever had to make an impossible choice to protect someone you love. My children, Rebecca sobbed, clutching at my arm with her uninjured hand. "He's taken my children. We have to call the police." Michael, who had been examining the photo over my shoulder, shook his head. "The message specifically says no police. If we involve law enforcement, he might—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. We all understood the implicit threat. "But we can't just give him what he wants," Jessica protested. "Once he has the money, what's to stop him from disappearing with the children anyway?" It was the question we were all thinking but afraid to voice. Warren had proven himself capable of elaborate deception, violence, and now kidnapping. There was no reason to believe he would honor any agreement once he had what he wanted. "I'm calling Detective Morales," I said firmly, already scrolling through my recent calls. Rebecca's eyes widened in panic.
Mom, no. You saw the message.
"No police. I'm not going to tell her about the kidnapping. Not yet," I explained. "But she needs to know that Warren might be attempting to leave the country with the children. They can monitor airports, train stations, border crossings." Michael nodded his approval. "Good thinking. That won't alert Warren directly, but might create a net to catch him if he tries to flee." My conversation with Detective Morales was brief and carefully worded. I expressed concern that Warren might attempt to take the children out of the country without permission, mentioned his abandoned car and strange behavior, but said nothing about the threatening text or photo. She promised to put alerts at all transportation hubs and to intensify the search, but cautioned that without evidence of an actual kidnapping, their options were limited in the immediate term. "What do we do now?" Rebecca asked after I hung up, her voice small with fear. "How do we get them back?" "First, we need more information," Michael said, his professional demeanor a stabilizing force in the chaos of the moment. "This text came from an unknown number, but we might be able to trace it or at least determine its general location." "I have friends who can help with that," Jessica offered, taking out her phone. "My brother works in cybersecurity." While Jessica made her call, Michael turned to me. "Mrs. Sullivan, I know this is difficult, but we need to consider what Warren's actual goal might be. The demand for $92 million suggests he wants your entire estate, but the logistics of transferring that much money would be complex and time-consuming. Is there a way he might expect you to access such a large sum quickly?" I thought about it, trying to set aside my fear for my grandchildren long enough to think logically. Most of the assets are in investments, trusts, and real estate. The largest liquid amount I could access quickly would be about $20 million from my personal accounts. "That's still a substantial sum," he noted. "Perhaps enough to convince him to release the children, especially if he believes more will follow." Rebecca shook her head, wincing at the movement. "You don't know Warren. He won't settle for less than everything. He's obsessive once he sets his mind on something. And he feels entitled to that money, like it's already his and you're just withholding it." My phone buzzed again with another text from the unknown number. Initial instructions: $20 million wire transfer to offshore account.
Details to follow.
Once confirmed, you get proof of life. Then we discuss the rest. You have 3 hours. "He's asking for exactly the amount I can access quickly," I said, showing them the message. "He must have researched the structure of my estate, perhaps during the break-in at my house. Or he has someone advising him," Michael suggested. "Someone with financial expertise who knows how to move large sums of money internationally." Jessica returned from making her call, her expression cautiously optimistic. "My brother says he can trace the phone's location if Warren uses it again. He needs more data." Another text or call. "Then let's give him a reason to contact us again," I decided, typing a reply. "How do I know the children are safe? I need to speak to them before I transfer any money." The response came almost immediately.
No calls.
"Too easily traced. You'll get another photo in 1 hour if you agree to the transfer. Account details attached." Attached to the message was a document containing information for a bank in the Cayman Islands. "He's thought this through," Michael observed grimly. "Offshore account. No direct communication that could be traced. He's clearly been planning this for some time. But why now?" Jessica wondered. Why kidnap the children today when he must know every law enforcement agency in the state is looking for him after the assault? Rebecca's expression darkened with sudden understanding. Because of Mom's visit today. He must have been watching Jessica's apartment, saw you come and go. He probably assumed you were changing your will again, maybe cutting him out completely after seeing my injuries. He couldn't wait any longer. That makes sense, Michael agreed. The break-in at your house, the attempt to access your medical records, the surveillance of Rebecca, he's been building toward something. When Rebecca left him, it accelerated his timeline. Your visit today might have been the final trigger. I stared at the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. If I transferred the money, would Warren really return the children? And if I didn't, what might he do to them? I need to call Harold, I said finally. He can arrange the transfer while we figure out our next move. Harold answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with concern. Eleanor? Is everything all right? I've been trying to reach you. No, Harold, everything is not all right. I explained the situation as concisely as possible. Rebecca's assault, the children's kidnapping, Warren's demand for $20 million. Harold's sharp intake of breath was the only indication of his shock. This is extreme, even for someone desperate for money. Has he made any specific threats against the children? Not explicitly, but the implication is clear. And given what he did to Rebecca, I understand. I can arrange the transfer, but Eleanor, you should know that once the money reaches that Cayman account, it will be virtually impossible to recover. And there's no guarantee Warren will keep his word. I know, I said, my voice steadier than I felt.
But I don't see that we have a choice.
My grandchildren's safety comes first. Everything else is just money.
All right.
I'll need about an hour to set this up. In the meantime, is there anything else I can do? Yes, I said, a plan beginning to form in my mind. I need you to contact Mark Shun at the FBI. Your friend Margaret's son? The agent.
Yes.
Don't tell him about the kidnapping directly. I don't want to risk Warren finding out we've involved federal authorities. But let him know we have a family emergency involving potential financial crimes across state lines. He'll understand what to do. After hanging up with Harold, I turned to find Rebecca, Michael, and Jessica staring at me with varying expressions of surprise and concern. You know an FBI agent? Jessica asked. Margaret's son, Mark. He specializes in financial crimes and human trafficking. If anyone can help us navigate this situation without endangering the children, it's him. Rebecca reached for my hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. Thank you, Mom, for everything. I know I don't deserve your help after how I've treated you, but... Stop, I interrupted gently. They're my grandchildren too. And you're my daughter, Rebecca. Despite everything that's happened between us, that hasn't changed. An hour later, as promised, another photo arrived. The children holding a copy of that day's newspaper, confirming they were still alive. They appeared physically unharmed but terrified, especially little Emma, whose eyes were red and swollen from crying. At least we know they're okay, Jessica said, trying to sound optimistic. For now, Rebecca replied, her voice hollow. But Warren's unpredictable when he's angry. And he must be desperate to have gone this far. Harold called to confirm that the transfer was ready to execute on my authorization. Eleanor, are you absolutely certain about this? $20 million is a small price to pay for my grandchildren's safety. I finished firmly. Do it, Harold. Very well. And I've spoken with Mark. He's on his way to Connecticut now, should arrive within the hour. He said to tell you he's bringing specialized resources. After authorizing the transfer, I sent a message to Warren's number. Transfer initiated. Confirmation should come through shortly. Now tell me where my grandchildren are. The reply was infuriatingly vague. When the money hits the account, I'll send an address. Not before. And remember, this is just the first installment. Rebecca, who had been watching over my shoulder, made a sound of frustration and fear. He's never going to let them go. Not until he has everything. Then we need to find them before the money clears, Michael said. Jessica, any update from your brother on tracing the phone? She shook her head. He needs more data. The texts are being bounced through multiple servers. But he did narrow it down to somewhere within a 30-mile radius of Hartford. That's something at least, I said, trying to maintain hope. And Mark will be here soon with FBI resources. As if on cue, my phone rang with Margaret's number. Eleanor? Mark just picked me up. We're about 15 minutes from the hospital. He says not to communicate further with Warren if possible. They have people working on tracking the phone. Tell him we'll be waiting. And Margaret? Thank you. When Mark arrived with Margaret 30 minutes later, I was struck by the transformation in my friend's son. The lanky, somewhat awkward young man I remembered had been replaced by a confident professional. His FBI credentials briefly flashed before being tucked away again. Mrs. Sullivan, he greeted me, his voice low and controlled. My mother has briefed me on the situation. I understand your grandchildren have been taken by your son-in-law, who has demanded a ransom of $20 million initially. That's correct. The transfer has already been initiated. He nodded, unsurprised. That was the right move. Child safety comes first. Now, I need to know everything about Warren Caldwell, his habits, preferences, connections, any properties he might have access to. Rebecca, who had insisted on participating despite her injuries, provided a detailed account of Warren's background, business dealings, and potential hiding places. He has a hunting cabin in the Berkshires, but it's the first place anyone would look. He's too smart for that. What about friends or business associates who might help him? Mark pressed. Someone with a vacation home, perhaps, or access to private property? She thought for a moment. There's Victor Hastings. They went to college together. Victor owns a technology consulting firm and has a lake house somewhere in northern Connecticut. Warren's mentioned staying there a few times. Mark made a note. Any other possibilities? His parents have a condo in Florida, but that's too far. He couldn't have gotten there so quickly. And his sister has a place in Vermont, but they haven't spoken in years. He alienated most of his family with his controlling behavior. What about hotels or rental properties? Does he have preferences, places he's stayed before? Rebecca's face suddenly lit with realization. The Lakeview Resort. It's about an hour north of here. We stayed there last summer in one of the private cabins. Warren liked it because the cabins are secluded, set back from the main resort. And he knows the manager, helped him with some legal issue a few years ago. Mark was already texting someone on his phone. Lakeview Resort. Location. Winstead. On Highland Lake. He nodded, continuing to type.
Good.
I have a team that can check it out discreetly. In the meantime, has there been any further communication from Warren since the transfer was initiated? No, I said. The last message said he'd send an address when the money cleared. And how long ago was the transfer initiated? About 45 minutes ago. Mark looked grim. Then we don't have much time. Once that money hits the Cayman account, Warren could be on the move. We need to. He was interrupted by my phone buzzing with an incoming call, not a text this time, but an actual call from the unknown number. Mark quickly attached some kind of device to my phone and nodded for me to answer, putting it on speaker. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Eleanor. Warren's voice was calm, almost pleasant, as if we were discussing a minor business matter rather than the kidnapping of 3 children. I see the transfer has been initiated. Very wise. I've done what you asked, Warren. Now tell me where the children are. He chuckled, the sound sending chills down my spine. Not quite yet. You see, there's been a slight change of plan. The $20 million is a good start, but I'm going to need the rest sooner rather than later. The rest of the money isn't liquid, Warren. It's in trusts, investments, real estate. I can't access it quickly. That's not my problem, Eleanor. You have 24 hours to liquidate another $30 million. If you fail, you get 1 grandchild back. If you succeed, you get all 3. Your choice which ones matter most to you. Rebecca made a strangled sound beside me, her face contorted with horror. Mark frantically gestured for her to remain silent. Warren, be reasonable, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. You know I can't possibly liquidate assets that quickly. Most of them are in irrevocable trusts. Then I suggest you get creative. Borrow against them. Sell property.
Do whatever it takes.
because the clock is ticking and these children are getting awfully tiresome with their crying and questions. Let me speak to them, I demanded. I need to know they're all right. There was a pause, then the sound of movement. Tyler's voice came on the line, trembling but trying to be brave. Grandma, we're okay. He hasn't hurt us. But Emma's really scared, and the phone was apparently snatched away, Warren's voice returning. Satisfied? They're fine.
For now.
24 hours, Eleanor. 30 million more. I'll be in touch with wire instructions. The call ended abruptly. Mark immediately began typing frantically on his own phone. We got it. The signal was active long enough to triangulate. He's definitely at the Lakeview Resort, just as Rebecca suspected. Then let's go. Rebecca tried to stand, swaying dangerously as her injuries protested the sudden movement. You need to stay here, Mark said firmly. You're in no condition to travel, and we need to move quickly and discreetly. A tactical team is already on its way to the resort, but they'll maintain surveillance only until we can confirm the children's exact location and develop a safe extraction plan. But they're my children, Rebecca protested. And that's precisely why you need to stay here, Mark insisted. Warren knows you. If he sees you or suspects are nearby, he might panic and do something rash. We can't take that risk. I took Rebecca's hand. Mark is right. The best thing we can do for the children is let the professionals handle this part. She subsided reluctantly, tears streaming down her face. Promise me you'll be careful. Warren he's not the man I thought I married. I don't know what he's capable of anymore. Mark's expression softened slightly. We'll be careful. Our priority is the children's safety. Nothing else matters. An hour later, Margaret, Michael, and I were in an unmarked FBI vehicle heading toward Winstead. Mark had initially objected to our presence, but I had been adamant. They're my grandchildren, Mark. I'm coming, even if I have to follow in my own car. Recognizing the futility of arguing, he had relented with conditions. You stay in the command vehicle at all times. You follow every instruction without question. And if things go sideways, you leave immediately when ordered. Agreed. I had agreed, as had Margaret and Michael, the latter insisting his security experience might prove useful. Rebecca remained at the hospital under Jessica's care, sedated at the doctor's recommendation to help her manage the stress and pain of her injuries. As we drove through the gathering dusk, Mark briefed us on the situation. The tactical team has confirmed Warren and the children are in Cabin 7, the most remote on the property. It's set back from the others, surrounded by trees, with a clear view of the approach road, which is why we're coming in from the lake side. What's the plan? Michael asked. We have a negotiator who will make initial contact by phone, using the pretext of a resort management issue requiring cabin relocation. While that's happening, a 4-person entry team will approach from the rear of the property. Their priority is to secure the children's safety. And Warren? I asked. Mark's expression hardened. Will be apprehended and charged with kidnapping, assault, and whatever financial crimes we can add to the list. He's looking at decades in prison. Good, Margaret said firmly. He deserves that and more. The Lakeview Resort appeared tranquil as we approached, its well-maintained grounds and rustic main lodge giving no indication of the drama unfolding in one of its secluded cabins. We were directed to a command vehicle parked discreetly in a service area behind the main building, where several FBI agents were monitoring communications and surveillance feeds. On one screen, I could see Cabin 7, its windows glowing warmly in the deepening twilight. It looked so normal, so peaceful, impossible to reconcile with the knowledge that inside, my terrified grandchildren were being held captive by a man driven to desperate measures by greed and entitlement. We're ready to initiate contact. The negotiator, a composed woman introduced as Agent Patel, informed Mark. Team is in position at the rear of the property. Mark nodded. Proceed. Agent Patel dialed Warren's number, put in a call on speaker for all of us to hear. It rang 4 times before Warren answered, his voice wary. Yes, Mr. Caldwell? This is Diane from Lakeview Resort Management. I'm so sorry to disturb you this evening, but we have an urgent situation requiring immediate attention." "What kind of situation?" Warren demanded, suspicion evident in his tone. "There's been a water main break affecting the plumbing in your cabin and several others. We need to relocate you immediately to another cabin while our maintenance team addresses the issue." There was a pause. "We're fine here. No plumbing problems. The issue is with the main line, sir. It hasn't affected your cabin yet, but it will within the hour. We're relocating all guests in that section as a precaution. I have a golf cart outside ready to take you and your children to our premium lakefront cabin at no additional charge." Another longer pause. "Send the cart. We'll be out in 10 minutes. "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Caldwell. The driver will wait for you." After the call ended, Mark turned to Agent Patel. "Good work. He's suspicious but cooperating. This gives us our window." On another monitor, I could see the tactical team moving silently through the trees behind the cabin, their progress barely visible in the low-light camera feed. My heart pounded as they approached the structure, taking positions at the rear door and windows. "Cart is in position at the front," reported another agent. "Driver is one of ours." Mark nodded, his focus intense. "Entry team, status?" "In position. Awaiting your command." "Execute on my mark." He paused, watching as movement became visible inside the cabin. 3, 2, 1, execute. What happened next unfolded with breathtaking speed. The tactical team breached the rear door while simultaneously, the front door opened as Warren emerged with the children. Seeing the FBI agents approaching from behind, Warren grabbed Emma, the youngest, pulling her in front of him as a shield. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice picked up by the directional microphones. "I'll hurt her. I swear I will." I gasped in horror, watching my youngest grandchild's terrified face on the monitor. Tyler and Madison stood frozen on the cabin steps, caught between the approaching agents and their father's desperate standoff. "Mr. Caldwell," called the team leader, his voice calm but authoritative. "Release the child. There's no way out of this situation. We have the cabin surrounded. Tell Eleanor to complete the transfer." Warren shouted. 30 million. Then I'll let them go." In the command vehicle, I turned to Mark. "Let me talk to him."
Please.
"I might be able to de-escalate this." Mark hesitated, then nodded to Agent Patel, who quickly established a connection to the team leader's communication system. "Warren," I said, my voice amplified through the leader's equipment. "This is Eleanor. Please let Emma go.
She's just a child."
"She's frightened." "Eleanor." His voice registered surprise. "You're here? Where are you?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is Emma, Tyler, and Madison. They're innocent in all this. Your quarrel is with me, not them." "You're right about that," he snarled. "This is your fault. All of it. You and your secret millions, your manipulations. You turned Rebecca against me."
No, Warren.
"Your own actions did that. But right now, none of that matters. What matters is doing the right thing for your children. They're watching you, Warren. What do you want them to see? A father who protects them, or a man who uses them as shields?" There was a moment of hesitation, and I saw Emma's small body tremble as Warren's grip briefly loosened. Then, to my horror, he tightened his hold again. "Nice try, Eleanor. But I'm not falling for your psychological games. I want my money. All of it. Until then, the children stay with me." Mark signaled to Agent Patel to cut the connection. "We need to try another approach. He's escalating, becoming more irrational." On the screen, I could see Tyler slowly turning toward his father, his young face set in an expression of determination that reminded me painfully of Edward. "Dad," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Let Emma go. Take me instead."
I'm bigger, stronger.
A better hostage." Warren looked momentarily taken aback by his son's offer. "Tyler, stay out of this. This is between me and your grandmother." "No, it's not," the boy insisted, taking a small step toward his father and sister. "It's about all of us. And you're scaring Emma. Look at her, Dad. She's terrified." Emma was indeed shaking violently now, her small face streaked with tears as she looked imploringly at her father. Something in that look, the pure, uncomprehending fear of a child who should never have been put in such a position, seemed to penetrate Warren's desperate focus. His grip on Emma loosened slightly. "I just wanted what was ours," he said, his voice suddenly less certain. "What should have been ours all along." "It was never yours," Tyler said, with a wisdom far beyond his 14 years. "It was Grandma's. And you hurt Mom. I saw you. We all saw you." Warren's face contorted with a complex mix of emotions: rage, shame, desperation. She was going to leave me.
Take you all away.
I couldn't let that happen. But it has happened, Tyler said simply. And this. He gestured at the armed agents surrounding them. This isn't going to change that. It's over, Dad. For a long, tense moment, Warren stood frozen in indecision, Emma still clutched against him. Then, with a sound that was half sob, half growl of frustration, he released her. Emma immediately ran to Madison, who enfolded her little sister in a protective embrace. "Tyler," Warren said, his voice breaking. "Son." But Tyler stepped back, moving to stand with his sisters.
"We're not going with you, Dad."
"Not anymore." The tactical team moved in swiftly then, securing Warren without further incident. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back once at his children, his expression a mask of defeat and dawning realization of all he had lost. I watched on the monitor as a female agent approached the children, kneeling to speak softly to Emma while keeping a respectful distance from all three. After a brief conversation, she led them toward a waiting vehicle, presumably to bring them to the command center. "They're safe," Mark confirmed, the tension visibly draining from his shoulders. "Warren is in custody, and the children are unharmed, at least physically. They'll be brought here momentarily." The relief that flooded through me was so intense it was almost painful. I slumped in my seat, suddenly aware of Margaret's steadying hand on my shoulder and the tears streaming unchecked down my face. "You did it," she said softly. "They're safe, Eleanor." "Tyler did it," I corrected, my voice choked with emotion. "That brave, incredible boy." When the children arrived at the command center minutes later, I had to restrain myself from rushing to them immediately. Mark had cautioned that they would be disoriented, frightened, and needed a gentle approach. But when Emma spotted me through the vehicle's window, she broke away from the agent escorting them and ran straight into my arms. "Grandma," she sobbed, her small body shaking with the force of her tears. "You came. You found us." I knelt to embrace her properly, gathering her close as Madison and Tyler approached more slowly. "Of course I came, sweetheart. I will always come for you. Always." Madison joined our embrace next, her 12-year-old dignity crumbling as she buried her face against my shoulder. Tyler hung back slightly, watching us with those old eyes in his young face. I extended my hand to him. "Tyler," I said softly. "What you did back there, your grandfather would have been so proud of you." "I know I am." Something in his composed expression finally broke then, and he stepped forward into our family circle, allowing me to pull him close. "I was so scared," he whispered against my hair. But I kept thinking about what Grandpa used to say, about how being brave isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what's right even when you are afraid. "That's exactly right," I told him, my heart full to bursting with love and pride. "And you were the bravest of us all today." The reunion with Rebecca at the hospital an hour later was emotional and healing. When the children saw their mother's battered face, there were fresh tears and questions, but also a powerful sense of relief and safety. Whatever lay ahead, the legal proceedings against Warren, the recovery from trauma, the rebuilding of family bonds, we would face it together. As I watched Rebecca with her children, I saw something I had feared was lost forever, the daughter I had raised, the woman Edward and I had hoped she would become. Compassionate, resilient, putting her children's needs above her own despite her physical pain. The entitled, cold person Warren had helped shape over years of influence had begun to fade, revealing the true Rebecca beneath. Later that night, As the children finally slept in hospital cots arranged in Rebecca's room, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "After everything I said, everything I did, you still came when it mattered most." "You're my daughter," I replied simply. That never changed, even when everything else did. "But I was horrible to you. At the hospital, when you were vulnerable and scared, I said things that can never be unsaid." I took her hand gently, mindful of her injured wrist. "Words can hurt deeply, Rebecca, but they can also heal. It's the actions that follow that truly matter. And today, I saw the real you. The mother who would do anything to protect her children. The woman strong enough to leave an abusive situation despite the risks and unknowns." "I want to be better," she whispered. "For them, for you, for myself. I don't want to be the person Warren shaped me into anymore." "Then don't be," I said simply. "Choose differently every day. It won't be easy, and there will be setbacks. But I'll be here to help you. We'll rebuild together." 2 weeks later, we gathered in Harold's office for a very different kind of meeting than our previous confrontation. Rebecca, her physical injuries healing but still visible, sat beside me rather than across from me. Tyler, Madison, and Emma were with Margaret at her house, enjoying what Madison had dubbed a normal boring afternoon with cookies and board games, something all 3 children had come to treasure after their ordeal. Warren remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of the charges against him. The $20 million I had transferred had been frozen in the Cayman account before Warren could access it, thanks to Mark's quick action and international connections. Recovery would take time, but was virtually certain. "I've prepared the documents as you requested, Eleanor," Harold said, placing a folder before me. "But I want to be absolutely clear that this is not necessary. The changed will we prepared previously is legally sound and reflects your wishes at that time." "I understand, Harold. But circumstances have changed, and so have my wishes." Rebecca looked up sharply. "Mom, you don't have to do this. I meant what I said. I'm not after your money. I just want a chance to rebuild our relationship, to be the daughter I should have been all along." "I know," I said, smiling at her. "And that's precisely why I'm making these changes." I turned back to Harold. "Please explain the new arrangements." Harold adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. "The new will maintains the educational trusts for the grandchildren, with Margaret remaining as trustee until they reach appropriate age. It establishes a separate trust for Rebecca's basic needs and health care, again with an independent trustee to prevent any future interference from Warren, even if he somehow avoids a lengthy prison sentence." "Which is highly unlikely," I interjected. "Mark says the prosecution has an exceptionally strong case." Harold nodded. "Indeed. Now, the most significant change is the removal of the conditional language regarding Rebecca's inheritance. Instead, there will be a phased inheritance plan, with Rebecca receiving increasing control over portions of the estate over a 10-year period." "Why the change?" Rebecca asked softly. "After everything that happened, why trust me with any of it?" I reached for her hand. "Because when it mattered most, when your children were in danger, when you had to choose between Warren's manipulation and doing what was right, you chose correctly. You showed courage, resilience, and true maternal love. Those are the values Edward and I always hoped to instill in you. But the things I said at the hospital were painful and cruel," I acknowledged. "But they were also influenced by years of Warren's manipulation, by the materialistic values he encouraged, by the isolation he gradually created around you. The woman who said those things isn't who you truly are, Rebecca. I see that now, and I think you do too." Tears filled her eyes. "I want to be worthy of this trust, Mom. I want to be the kind of mother to my children that you were to me, providing not just material comfort but values, character, the things that really matter." "You already are," I assured her. "I've seen it in how you've put their emotional needs first despite your own physical pain, in how you've been honest with them about Warren's actions while still honoring their complicated feelings about their father. That's real parenting, messy, imperfect, but guided by love." After signing the revised documents, Rebecca and I walked through the park across from Harold's office, enjoying the spring sunshine and the simple pleasure of being together without tension or hidden agendas. I've been thinking about what comes next, she said as we paused to watch a young family feeding ducks at the pond. The divorce will be finalized soon. The house will be sold to cover Warren's legal fees and debts. The children and I need a fresh start. You could stay with me, I offered. The house has plenty of room, and I'd love to have you all there. She smiled but shook her head. That's incredibly generous, Mom. But I think we need our own space, somewhere without memories of Warren, somewhere the children can heal. Besides, she added with a small smile, I need to stand on my own 2 feet, get a real job, establish my independence. I understand, I said, and I truly did. This was the Rebecca I had always hoped for, thoughtful, determined to make her own way rather than relying on others. But the offer stands if you ever need it. Actually, she said hesitantly, there is something I'd like your help with. Not money, she added quickly.
Advice.
I'm thinking of going back to school, finishing the social work degree I abandoned when I married Warren. With everything we've been through, I think I could help other families, other women in similar situations. My heart swelled with pride and a deep, healing joy. I think that's a wonderful idea. Your experience would be invaluable to others facing abuse or manipulation. It won't be easy, she admitted. Balancing school, work, the children, the ongoing legal proceedings. No, I agreed.
It won't be easy.
But you're stronger than you know, Rebecca. And you won't be doing it alone. We're family, not just by blood, but by choice now. By conscious, deliberate choice. As we continued our walk, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from that terrible moment in the hospital when I heard my daughter dismiss me as old and useless, to this new beginning built on painful truths and hard-won wisdom. The fortune Edward and I had accumulated had nearly destroyed our family when revealed. The fortune Edward and I had accumulated had nearly destroyed our family when revealed, becoming both a weapon and a battleground. But in the end, it had also been the catalyst for truth, for stripping away pretenses, for revealing who we truly were beneath the roles we had played for so long. If you're watching this, please subscribe and share if you believe that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the strength of our character and the love we share with those who matter most. 6 months after Warren's arrest, life had found a new rhythm. Rebecca and the children had moved into a modest but comfortable townhouse not far from my home, purchased with a small portion of their trust funds. As promised, Rebecca had enrolled in social work courses at the local university, throwing herself into her studies with a passion and purpose I had never seen in her before. The children were healing too, each in their own way. Emma, resilient as only the very young can be, had bounced back the quickest, though she still sometimes woke with nightmares that sent Rebecca rushing to her room in the middle of the night. Madison had turned to art, filling sketchbooks with images that gradually evolved from dark, chaotic scenes to more hopeful visions as the weeks passed. And Tyler, my brave, remarkable grandson, had found his voice as a writer, keeping a journal that his therapist encouraged as a way to process his complex feelings about his father's betrayal. Warren's trial had concluded swiftly, the evidence against him overwhelming. Between the assault on Rebecca, the kidnapping, the financial crimes uncovered during the investigation, and the damning testimony from his own children, he had received a sentence of 25 years. Rebecca had attended the sentencing with me, her face composed and resolute as the judge delivered the verdict. "Are you all right?" I had asked her afterward, as we walked out of the courthouse into the bright autumn sunshine. She had considered the question carefully before answering. "Yes, I think I am. Not happy. I don't think anyone could be happy seeing the father of their children sentenced to prison, no matter what he did. But relieved. Relieved that he can't hurt us anymore, that the children are safe, that we can finally move forward without looking over our shoulders." Today, we were gathered in my backyard for a different kind of milestone, a small celebration of Tyler's 15th birthday. Margaret was there with her husband David. Jessica had come with her new boyfriend Alex, and Michael Reeves, who had become something of a family friend, was manning the grill with surprising skill for a former detective. "Grandma," Tyler called, breaking away from a basketball game with some school friends to jog over to where I sat on the patio. I've been meaning to ask you something. What is it, sweetheart? I patted the chair beside me, and he dropped into it, his lanky frame all elbows and knees in that endearing way of teenage boys. I found some of Grandpa's old journals in your study the other day when I was looking for that book you mentioned. I hope it's okay that I read some of them. Of course it's okay. They're part of your heritage. He nodded thoughtfully. That's actually what I wanted to ask about. In one of the journals, Grandpa wrote about his philosophy about money, how he believed it should be a tool, not a goal. How he worried that telling me about the family wealth too early might, I think his words were, distort my perception of my place in the world. That sounds like your grandfather, I said, smiling at the memory of Edward's thoughtful, deliberate approach to life. He believed strongly that character is formed through effort and overcoming challenges, not through ease and privilege. Do you think he was right? To keep the money secret, I mean? I considered the question carefully, knowing that my answer mattered to this thoughtful young man who had already faced more challenges than many adults. I think he was right in principle, but perhaps too rigid in application. There's value in allowing young people to develop their own work ethic and sense of purpose without the distraction of great wealth. But there's also value in honesty and transparency within families. So, what would you do differently if you could go back? I would have found a middle path, I admitted. I would have been honest with your mother about our financial situation while still maintaining reasonable boundaries and expectations. I would have introduced the concept of wealth as a responsibility rather than a privilege or a secret. Tyler nodded, seeming to absorb this. Mom's different now, you know. Since everything happened with Dad, she actually listens when I talk. She asks about my day and really wants to know the answer. And she's working really hard at school. I've noticed, I said softly. She's becoming the person she was always meant to be. Is that because of what happened? Because of Dad's betrayal and everything? Partly, I acknowledged. Sometimes it takes a profound shock to break old patterns and see ourselves clearly. But it's also because your mother is making difficult choices every day, choosing growth over comfort, honesty over self-protection, genuine connection over superficial approval. That's all her, Tyler. That's her strength, not just her response to circumstances. He seemed satisfied with this answer, and after a moment, he asked another question that caught me by surprise. Are you happier now, Grandma? Even with everything that happened? I looked around my backyard, taking in the scene. Rebecca laughing with Jessica near the flower beds I had planted with Emma's enthusiastic but chaotic help. Madison showing Margaret her latest sketchbook. Michael flipping burgers while discussing something earnestly with David. The pain of the past year had not vanished, but it had been transformed into something else, a hard-won wisdom, a deeper appreciation for genuine connection, a family rebuilt on honesty rather than illusion. Yes, I told Tyler, realizing as I spoke that it was absolutely true. I am happier. Not because of what we went through. I would spare you children that ordeal if I could, but because of where we've arrived. We're more authentic with each other now. More real. He nodded, seeming to understand exactly what I meant. It's like Grandpa wrote in another journal entry I found. The purpose of wealth is not to insulate us from life's challenges, but to give us the freedom to meet them on our own terms. I think we're doing that now, aren't we? We are indeed, I agreed, marveling at the wisdom in this young man who carried so much of Edward in him. Now go enjoy your party. 15 only happens once. He grinned, suddenly just a boy again rather than the old soul who had emerged during our conversation.
Thanks, Grandma.
For everything. As Tyler rejoined his friends, Rebecca came to sit beside me, a glass of lemonade in her hand and a thoughtful expression on her face. What were you and Tyler discussing so seriously? She asked. Your father's philosophies about wealth and family. Tyler found some of his journals. She nodded. I've been reading them too, actually. I wish I had known Dad better. The real Dad, not just the history teacher who was careful with money and loved baseball. He would have revealed more of himself to you eventually, I said. We both would have. We just waited too long, thinking we were protecting you. And instead, you left me unprepared for the reality of wealth and all its complications. There was no accusation in her tone, just a statement of fact. I'm trying to do better with my children. Tyler and I have had several conversations about the trusts, about what it means to have financial security without letting it define you. Madison and Emma are still a bit young for the full picture, but I'm introducing the concepts gradually. You're a wonderful mother, Rebecca, I said, meaning it completely. You always were, in many ways. You just lost sight of your priorities for a while under Warren's influence. She sighed, watching Emma chase a butterfly near the flower beds. I let him reshape me into someone I didn't even recognize. It happened so gradually that I didn't see it until it was almost too late. The constant subtle criticisms, the isolation from friends who weren't good enough, the focus on appearances and status above all else. That's how abusers work, I said gently. They don't start with control and violence. They start with charm and gradually increase their influence until you can't see a way out. I see it so clearly now, especially in my social work courses. The textbook patterns of isolation, gaslighting, financial control, I lived through all of it. And I didn't even recognize it because it came disguised as ambition, as standards, as wanting the best for our family. I took her hand, noticing how strong it had become. Not just physically as her injuries healed, but in the steadiness of her grip, the quiet confidence she now carried. You got out, Rebecca. Many never do. And you're using that experience to help others now. That takes tremendous courage. I had help, she said, squeezing my hand. I had you. The months that followed brought more healing, more growth, more rebuilding of family bonds that had been strained almost to breaking. Rebecca excelled in her studies, bringing home papers and projects she was genuinely proud of, not for the grades, but for the substance of the work. The children thrived in their new environment, gradually shedding the wariness that had become second nature under Warren's volatile rule. Christmas that year was a revelation, not the ostentatious, appearance-focused affair it had become in recent years, but a warm, genuine celebration centered on togetherness rather than presents. We held it at my house, the rooms filled with homemade decorations created during weekend crafting sessions with the children. The gifts were thoughtful rather than expensive. Tyler gave me a bound collection of his own poems. Madison presented everyone with framed sketches she had created of our favorite places, and Emma had painstakingly made bookmarks for each of us, decorated with pressed flowers from my garden. Rebecca's gift to me was perhaps the most meaningful of all, a memory book she had created, filled with photographs spanning my entire life, including many I thought had been lost. There were pictures of Edward and me as a young couple, of Rebecca as a baby and growing child, of family vacations and quiet moments at home. And alongside these older memories were newer ones, photographs from the past year of healing, of our reclaimed family building new traditions and connections. How did you find all these? I asked, turning the pages with wonder. Some of these photos were in albums I thought were destroyed in the basement flood years ago. Rebecca smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. I had help. Dad kept copies of all the important ones in his study. Harold had them in storage all these years and gave them to me when I explained what I wanted to create. I traced a photograph of Edward holding newborn Rebecca, his face alight with wonder and love. He would be so proud of you, of the woman you've become, of the mother you are. I hope so, she said softly. I'm trying to live up to his example now. To yours too. You're exceeding it, I told her truthfully. Edward and I made our own mistakes, keeping secrets we thought were protecting you, creating a false narrative about our financial situation that ultimately left you vulnerable to someone like Warren. You're doing better with your children, being honest with them, preparing them for the realities of life, while still preserving their childhood innocence. After the children went to bed that night, Rebecca and I sat by the fire, sharing a pot of tea and the comfortable silence of true companionship. Snow fell softly outside the windows, transforming the world into a hushed white landscape that seemed to mirror the peace we had found within ourselves and with each other. I've been thinking about something, Rebecca said finally. About the fortune, about what to do with it in the long term. Oh, I sipped my tea, curious about where this conversation might lead. Dad built it through careful investment, and you've maintained it the same way. It's grown to a point where none of us could spend it all in several lifetimes, even if we tried. And while the trusts for the children ensure they'll always be secure, I've been wondering if there's more we could do with it. What did you have in mind? A foundation, she said, her eyes brightening with purpose. A real one, not just a tax shelter like so many of Warren's friends established. Something focused on helping families affected by domestic abuse, providing not just emergency shelter, which existing organizations do well, but long-term support for rebuilding lives. Financial literacy education, career retraining, therapeutic services for children who've witnessed abuse, legal advocacy. As she outlined her vision, I felt a swell of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. This was Edward's daughter, my daughter, speaking with passion and purpose about using our family's resources to create meaningful change in an area she now understood intimately. The Sullivan Family Foundation, I mused. I think your father would approve, wholeheartedly. Really? You think it's a good idea? I think it's an excellent idea. And I think you're exactly the right person to lead it, with your combined personal experience and professional training. She looked startled. Me? But I'm still a student. I don't have the expertise to run a foundation. Not yet, I agreed. But you will. And in the meantime, we can assemble a board of experienced professionals to help guide the initial setup. Harold knows many people in the nonprofit sector who could advise us. The idea took root and flourished over the following months. Rebecca threw herself into researching existing organizations, identifying gaps in services, and consulting with experts in the field. By the time she graduated with her social work degree a year and a half later, the Sullivan Family Foundation was ready to launch, with Rebecca as its executive director. The foundation's first initiative, a transitional housing program that allowed survivors of domestic abuse and their children to stay for up to 2 years while rebuilding their lives, opened on what would have been Edward's 80th birthday. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Rebecca spoke with eloquence and authority about the foundation's mission, her personal journey, and the legacy she hoped to create. My father believed that wealth was a tool, not a goal, she told the assembled guests and media. He and my mother built their fortune through careful stewardship and wise decisions, always with an eye toward creating security for future generations. Today, we're extending that vision of security to families who have experienced the devastation of domestic abuse. Standing at the back of the crowd with Margaret beside me, I felt Edward's presence so strongly I almost turned to look for him. He would have been bursting with pride at this moment, not because of the foundation's impressive endowment or the positive media attention, but because his daughter had found her purpose, her authentic voice, her way of making a meaningful difference in the world. She's magnificent, Margaret murmured, squeezing my hand. You've both come so far. We have, I agreed, though not in the way I ever would have imagined. The journey from that hospital bed, where I had heard my daughter dismiss me as old and useless, to this moment of profound pride and connection had been neither straight nor easy. It had involved betrayal, danger, heartbreak, and hard truths. But it had also brought revelation, redemption, and a rebuilt family bond stronger than it had ever been before. Warren remained in prison, his appeals consistently denied as the evidence against him was overwhelming. The children visited him occasionally, a decision Rebecca and I had agonized over but ultimately supported as part of their healing process. These visits were supervised and became less frequent as time passed, the children gradually creating new lives that centered around more positive influences. Tyler, now 17, had blossomed into a thoughtful young man with a passion for literature and ethics. His experiences had given him a maturity beyond his years, but also a deep capacity for empathy that drew people to him. Madison, at 15, had developed her artistic talents into a powerful form of expression, creating works that spoke to themes of resilience and transformation. And 12-year-old Emma, while still carrying the innocent joy that was her hallmark, had developed a fierce protective instinct toward others that suggested she might follow her mother into a helping profession someday. As for me, at 75, I found myself more engaged with life than I had been in years. I volunteered regularly at the foundation, sharing my financial expertise and life wisdom with the families we served. I had developed a particularly meaningful connection with a group of older women who, like me, had discovered their children's true characters late in life, some for better, some for worse. Together, we formed a support network that combined practical advice with emotional understanding, helping each other navigate the complex terrain of family relationships in our later years. Rebecca and I had settled into a relationship more balanced and authentic than anything we had known before. We were no longer playing the roles of the self-sacrificing mother and the entitled daughter, nor were we adversaries across a battlefield of hurt and resentment. Instead, we had become something richer and more rewarding, true family, bound by choice as much as blood, by respect as much as obligation, by shared purpose as much as shared history. On the evening of the Foundation's second anniversary, Rebecca and I sat on my back porch, watching fireflies dance in the summer twilight. The children were inside, engaged in a spirited board game with Margaret and David, their laughter drifting out through the open windows. "I've been thinking about that day in the hospital," Rebecca said quietly. "When I said those terrible things about you being old and useless. I don't think I've ever properly apologized for that specific moment." "You've apologized in 1,000 ways since then," I assured her. "Through your actions, your changed perspective, the relationship we've built. Still, I need to say it explicitly. Those words, they were the worst things I've ever said to anyone, and I said them to the person who deserved them least." "I'm so deeply sorry, Mom." "You have never been useless. You are the foundation our family is built on, the wisdom that guides us, the love that sustains us." I reached for her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, the warmth of her skin against mine. "Thank you for that. But, in a strange way, I'm almost grateful for that moment now." She looked startled. "Grateful? How could you be?" "Because it was the beginning of truth between us. It was painful, devastating even, but it cracked open the careful facade we had both maintained for so long. It allowed us to see each other clearly for perhaps the first time in decades." Rebecca considered this, her expression thoughtful. "I suppose you're right. It was a terrible beginning, but it led us here. And here is so much better than where we were before, pretending and performing roles instead of truly connecting." "Exactly," I said. "Edward used to say that the most valuable thing money can buy is freedom, not just freedom from want, but freedom to be authentic, to make choices based on values rather than necessity." It took us a long time and a difficult journey to understand what he meant, but I think we're living it now. Inside the house, Emma's delighted shriek announced some victory in the game, followed by Tyler's good-natured groan of defeat and Madison's laughter. The sounds of family, real, imperfect, loving family, filled the evening air. Rebecca smiled, squeezing my hand. "Yes," she agreed softly. "We're finally living it now." As darkness fell fully and the first stars appeared above us, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The fortune that Edward and I had built, that I had protected for so long, had nearly destroyed our family when revealed. But in the end, it had also provided the means for rebirth, for purpose, for creating a legacy beyond money, a legacy of healing, truth, and genuine connection. I was no longer the mother dismissed as old and useless in that hospital corridor. I was Eleanor Sullivan, mother, grandmother, mentor, philanthropist, survivor. I had faced betrayal and danger, had nearly lost everything that truly mattered, and had emerged stronger and wiser on the other side. And if my journey had taught me anything, it was this. True wealth is not measured in dollars, but in relationships restored, in purpose discovered, in love that survives even the darkest moments of doubt and betrayal. By that measure, despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I was rich beyond imagining. The end.